Innovators livecast series. My name is Ariel Russo. I'm the program director here for the Northeast at Brand Innovators, and welcome to today's summit on the future of travel. Today, we will be joined by marketing leaders from IHG, Expedia, Getaway, Marriott International, and many more. Please be sure to ask questions and use the chat to engage with both of our speakers and attendees. Before we kick off with today's livecast, we would like to share a short video that highlights our incredible 2021 Trend Watch Summit.
During South by Southwest, I believe it's our biggest activation, a clubhouse of sorts for all the brand marketers that descend on Austin. Great food, great people, great conversations. And unfortunately, for the second year in a row, we can't be in Austin right now, but we are thrilled to be here with you guys virtually. This is our first ever 4-day summit, the Brand Innovators Trend Watch event.
Using fresh ingredients, it's really very important to have a great cocktail. 3/4 of 1 ounce. Voila. Ladies and gentlemen, let's raise our glass. Salute!
One of the challenges in the pandemic was, of course, so much of our business came through the drive-through. A higher percentage would come into our shops because they wanted that experience. Well, how can we interject over the long term that experiential component into our drive-through, into digital, into other components of our business? We have relied on that shop experience. Then the question becomes, how do you up that experience and make it unique in a bunch of different channels?
That's been, marketing since the dawn of time, but now it's that we can do it in a one-on-one scale if we have the right tools, if we have the right data, which just means we need to think about it in new, different ways.
What we continue to do is stay very close to our guests, like what's happening right now in pop culture, not what happened, 2 hours ago or 3 hours ago, and basically open up a whole avenue that we call internally as live advertising. It's really understanding what's happening in society currently, like today, right now.
When Pizza Hut was at its best, we were also on the forefront of innovation. And last year we were able to bring to market the first plant-based pizza launched nationally by any pizza player in the U.S. with our partnership with Beyond.
We have a lot of really strong, great marketing talent out in the various markets that really understand what's going on at the local level and can help kind of take what we know about the brand and kind of macro level, but bring it to life in such a locally relevant way.
The role of consumer marketing is to figure out ways in which we can increase the percentage of people who say, there's a community for me on Reddit. This is a relevant product for me. It starts to become a daily habit and something that they're finding value in every single day.
We did disrupt the industry and we disrupted an experience. And I think we're still innovating in those areas, especially in results, to the pandemic of how we're reaching consumers and how they're shopping and virtual appointments and how we're connecting with them.
Most consumers today want to invest in brands that are doing good in the world.
As we think about DEI, it's not just people of color, it's people in the, LGBTQ plus community, people with different abilities. As we think about our Asian brothers and sisters and what they're going through at a time like this, companies really have to pause and really embrace their internal employees. And so a lot of the work that needs to start has to and must start internally.
Diversity is a fact. It's just representation. It's who we are. It's identity. Everyone is diverse. Inclusion is a choice. It's a choice that is often made by the person including versus the person needing to be included. So there's already privilege in that equation. All of us can remember a time where we haven't belonged and what that feels like, and also know what belonging needs to feel like and should feel like and connect to it. And so it is a universal concept. It transcends all people. It is directly connected to humanity.
In the face of such hate and in the face of such violence, if what the Me Too movement, if what Black Lives Matter taught us was that this is a worthy fight, worthy of our time, worthy of our attention. And this is not just our fight. This is a cultural awakening that's been happening for a few years now. We have to continue to fight for a better future so then the people that come after us don't have to have the same conversations. They can have a different conversation.
It really takes that breaking through to the other side of bringing together a coalition of allies across all communities for us to kind of break out of the echo chamber and really turn this into a national movement. And I'm so grateful for this space where we can have that community as members and allies.
This is a really important time for brands to step forward. This is not a time to call it play it safe and be unheard, unseen. You've got to be seen, you've got to be visible.
With the cultural demographic shift that's happening in this country, more and more people are asking those questions. What is it the brand is doing and what are they standing for and how are you showing up? So engaging with the consumer and leading by example is incredibly important.
Unmute. Welcome back. Now, please welcome two amazing speakers to the stage, Stephanie and Jeff. Stephanie, the Vice President and Global Brand Management from Holiday Inn Express, and Jeff, the Product Marketing Director from Neustar. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the introduction.
Hi there.
Hi. I'll leave it to you to kick it off.
Thank you so much. My name is Jeff Alter. I'm a product marketing director for Neustar, a company that helps you know your customers, orchestrate their journey, and optimize your investments. Stephanie, can you please introduce yourself?
I'm Vice President of Brand Management for globally for Holiday Inn Express as part of the IHG family.
Great. Stephanie, I'm so excited to be with you today discussing the future of travel. So let's get right into it. Yeah. You've had a very interesting career path. Can you please talk a little bit about your background and how you ended up in this exciting role?
Sure. So, 15 years ago, if you asked me if I was to be in this role, I probably would not have guessed so. I started my career as an accountant. I worked on the advisory side of accounting for Ernst & Young and really loved it. I'm very much like a numbers geek and ultimately got my CPA. But one thing I learned in the advisory side of accounting is I also really loved just connecting with executives and solving problems. And so when I went back to went back to business school and really got a chance to, and those who had experience with the case method and had the opportunity to potentially even visit Harvard Business School, you really get this opportunity to test out new ideas on a daily basis. And I really fell in love with this concept of merging operations and organizational topics and knew I wanted to go be an advisor to senior executives as they solve those problems. So post business school, went back into consulting, but more on the strategy and org side. And through all that work, interestingly enough, through all my travels around the US and did a stint in India, starting 2 tech companies there. And then really fell in love with this concept of deeply understanding consumer insights in order to build out better tech products and better brands. I really just fell in love with this industry, the hotel industry. At that time, interestingly enough, Hilton reached out about a role to lead strategy. And it was the perfect time because I think in every Road Warriors experience, they have a moment where all of a sudden the bed at the hotel, as nice as the bed might be, is not as comfortable as their bed at home. And they're ready to do their strategy work for one company. So I was excited to join Hilton and lead strategy and then ultimately new ventures. And last fall, I actually reached out about this role leading Holiday Inn Express globally. And I thought it was a great opportunity to combine my love for customer insights, operations, which is essentially a lot of what we do within brand management, and then taking all those insights and applying it to our marketing messages. And so it's been a really great fit. I see it's a really great company and also just a really great family of people.
That is quite the career journey. And it sounds like you've built up some very valuable experience in your time leading up to IHG. Now, Stephanie, as I started preparing for our conversation today, of course, one of the first places I looked was your LinkedIn profile. And something caught my eye immediately. I loved one of the words that showed up in your LinkedIn profile headline, and that word is optimist. Such a critically important thing to be today. How has that optimism helped you through the pandemic?
It's interesting. And I went back and forth on whether or not to even include that on my LinkedIn profile, but it's something that's such a core part of who I am that I think it's important for people to know when they meet me, before they enter into a meeting, that I'm always going to try and find the silver linings in all things. I think there are silver linings in every event that occurs in our lives, whether or not it's professionally or personally. And once we figure out what the silver lining is and we focus on them, we tend to, I think, to fare better in life. And so I think this definitely has applied throughout the pandemic. It's also applied throughout our work every day, especially in this industry where we're constantly challenged with new questions around how we serve our guests, how we make sure we're the right brand for our owners. And, even though I'm a combination of very data-driven and, very much a logical person when it comes to decision making, I like to understand the whys behind decisions. I also like to combine that with a lot of heart. And I think that's where the optimism comes in. I think it's important to be clear about how well you're performing as a business, but I also think it's equally important to understand the human impact of all decision making. So being an optimist and assuming the best in people and situations helps me ensure that I'm bringing my heart to all decision making. That's a really good catch.
I love that. And I think sometimes I can be accused of looking at a glass and saying that glass is half empty. So perhaps I can channel some of your optimism for myself. Stephanie, you also said in a recent interview, something that caught my eye. You said organizations value leaders who are solutions oriented. How do you try to be solutions oriented in your role? And how do you inspire your teams to be solutions oriented?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Well, I mentioned earlier that I spent many years as a management consultant, and one thing I learned during those years was to make sure that you deeply understand the problem that you're trying to solve, and treat every problem like an opportunity. And in my role, we're often faced with both strategic and operational questions, and sometimes it can feel like the hurdle is a little bit too high. But I'm often surprised that when you're experiencing these hurdles, you can often overcome it by just saying, like, what is possible? Or are we sure it's not possible to do X? And I think oftentimes when your team hears this over and over and over again, they start going through the same process themselves. This is going to be the cheat code for anybody who ever interviews with me in the future. But one question I always ask people is, tell me your life story and key decisions that you've made along the way. So 2 to 3 key decisions. And, what I'm actually looking for are examples where you've actually shown yourself to be solutions oriented, where you've experienced some sort of challenge or hurdle and you've gone past and thought about in new innovative ways to solve it. And so I think the more that you invest in teaching your team how to be solutions oriented and use that mindset, the better the outcomes are for not just the work that you do, but the experience that your customers have with your product or brand.
I love that. And also nice spoiler alert there for your future interviewees. I think it's great advice. And you also make a great point that it's so important to understand the challenge in front of you before you try to tackle it. So I really couldn't agree with that more. And you have a lot of challenges on your plate because you wear a lot of hats. Stephanie, you're responsible for marketing strategy, brand design, brand experience, growth, commercial performance. I think it took me like 3 breaths just to get through all of that. How do you find the right balance between those various initiatives and functions?
Yeah, that's something I love about my job is every day and every hour I'm tackling a different topic. And what's great about the model that we use at IHG is I have great partners across the business in all these areas, as well as members of my team. I think, how do I handle thinking through where I should spend my time? Prioritization. I think prioritization is key to any strategy. So at the very beginning of the week, I'm very clear about my goals and intentions for the week and defining what success looks like. I also do that each morning. And if there's something on my calendar that is not aligned with our goals for the week and it's not a priority for the brand, I move it to the next week. I think it's just really important that every day you're clear on what you're trying to achieve. But you're right. I sometimes I spend And now we're thinking about a design decision for the Holiday Inn Express brand and how we can potentially continue to be one of the most competitive design options. Or I'm thinking about how do we roll out a new experience, whether or not that's breakfast or it's a service model that we want to try out, or we're thinking about how do we open new hotels in new regions and who's the right sort of strategic partner to do so. It's a fun job because I do get to wear many hats, but the way in which I think you're successful in the role is making sure you're clear on your intentions and having a very detailed prioritization effort to ensure that every day you're meeting the goals at hand.
For sure. It sounds like you've got a lot to juggle, so I'm not surprised to hear that prioritization is part of your secret sauce. In a recent interview, you also said that it's important to look at business models outside of the travel industry to find potential disruptors. What trends or disruptors have you seen outside of travel that are interesting or that you might want to adopt?
Yeah, I love this question, particularly because I think it's something that you need to ensure you're constantly looking at disruptors, whether or not it's in your industry or outside your industry, or just staying close to technology. And you see elements of disruption everywhere you go. So it's a really good question. It's something I ask my team on a regular basis to think about as well. But you know what, even before the pandemic, we were starting to see a lot of digital transformation and this merging between service, digital, and the physical world. And, I remember 2 years ago, I was on a road trip and we stopped in a McDonald's. I can't actually remember the last time I had actually entered into a McDonald's at the time. But stopped at the McDonald's and walked in, and instead of going up to go speak to somebody to order, there was a kiosk where I could order, and they gave me a number, and then I used that number to then just pick up my food, and that was all well and good. But one thing that was interesting from a service operations perspective, when I got into the McDonald's, they had high top seating, they had outlets everywhere, there were nice chairs, and it didn't actually feel like a McDonald's. It actually felt like McDonald's meets Starbucks meets WeWork. It felt like a place that I actually could have a meeting and that I actually could sit for quite a bit of time. And it was interesting to me because not only do they have a great setup, but the Wi-Fi capability was really great. And what it reminded me is that we have been merging this, work and life question for quite some time. The pandemic just forced us to move it, 20 years ahead of what we thought when we thought it would occur. So I think in the service operations space, we're just seeing this merging of service, of technology, and of the physical world. And guests, as they start experiencing that more and more in restaurants, at other types of events, they're going to expect the same thing within their hotels. And so that we're definitely applying the same sort of thinking as we look at our hotel brands. Another area that I think is really interesting is Geo-Location Strategy and the fact that mobile devices have enabled all of us to better understand our consumer, because we can learn more about where people travel, what retail outlets are near them. And I think because of that, we're able to customize our messaging based on these insights. And this is something that's going on, I think, across the industry. Now, naturally, we have to be thoughtful about privacy, which I know, every company is actively thinking about. But how cool is it that, brands can better serve me because they understand the sort of brands and activities that I love. So that's really cool. We're also seeing a lot of innovations around payments going on around the world. And, starting here within the US, Disney started off thinking about this when they created their wristband, where you can go and you can try any ride and you can pay for anything through your wristband. But Amazon Go, I feel like, took this to another level with the grab and go capabilities. And as you know, at our almost 3,000 hotels, we have retail outlets in them, and we're actively thinking about how we can make those more technology enhanced. I think that will take time, but I think one thing that's really exciting about hotel stays is, when you go stay at a hotel, oftentimes you do kind of want that seamless integration between your technology and the things that you're looking to achieve. So whether or not it's ordering food, getting your breakfast, getting delivery, going down and picking up your water and your favorite snack, I think that integration of technology you'll start to see more and more within hotels. And then lastly, for those that know me really well, know that I love robots and any Internet of Things technology, and I think that's both of those areas are going to continue to evolve within the service operations space. We're seeing companies like Domino's that are investing in capabilities that allow delivery without human beings, right? They're allowing folks to get access to their pizza and it's going to be delivered through some robot-like capabilities. I think we might start seeing similar sorts of services within our hotel industry. I think we're going to start seeing ways in which we can make the hotel more connected to technology. So whether or not you're able to change the temperature in the room or change whether or not you want lights on or lights off, or you want your window shades open or not. I think those are some innovations that we're continuing to investigate to make the experience at the hotel feel a lot like it feels when you're at home. At our brand, we've already started adopting and thinking through a lot of innovations, whether or not it's keyless entry at many of our hotels, and to think through how can we make the breakfast experience better through using digital devices. You'll likely see more and more of these amenities in our hotels in the coming years.
That's so interesting. And I love that McDonald's is the place where you happen to stumble upon some inspiration. That's so interesting. And I think we're all, so eager to see how the travel industry is able to leverage new types of technology in the future, which is a good segue to the future of travel. We see all these numbers coming in about the continuing rebound for the travel category, yet at the same time, we know that we're still far from returning to normal. Can you talk about some of the early results you've seen from Q1 and talk about what they mean to you and the brand?
Yeah, I just want to say kudos to everybody that's worked in the travel industry this last year,
Indeed.
Year and a half. It has not been easy, but I also so thankful to all of our customers and our owners that have felt the need to stick with us. And I think especially our customers, the fact that they continue to want to choose IHG Hotel and Resort brands, and we see it in our results. So, as we know, we're already seeing evidence that, when the restrictions are lifted, that customers are definitely ready to travel. And as, the rollout vaccines become more established and, travel restrictions ease, we're seeing that the strength of our brands, our portfolio is ensuring that guests feel more confident to travel, but it's also well positioning our brands for success. But in certain regions, there's risk, right? There's volatility around when folks are going to get the vaccine. There's some macroeconomic issues that go on in certain regions, and so we have to be thoughtful about that. In the Americas, we're seeing great performance, very much led by leisure trips. I think many of us went on the spring break trip to some warm destination or some outdoor location that we're just so excited to learn more about our local environments. But we are seeing, especially in our leisure areas in Florida and Texas along the coast, performance is doing really well. And then as we move into summer, if you haven't booked your summer vacation, book it now. I heard the other day, actually, also, if you are planning to get married and you haven't booked your wedding, book it now too, because, business is definitely picking up. But, we are a global company. So if you think about what's going on in the rest of the world, leisure demand continues to grow in places like China. And, we saw the rebound there fastest. And we're also seeing a lot more corporate and group bookings. And I know that's an area that we're all interested in. And then we look at parts of the rest of the world. So Europe, Middle East, East, Africa, and other parts of Asia, I think this is where it's more of a mixed picture. So very much a focus on staying keen on where we have government restrictions across Europe. But there are some encouraging signs around Middle East. And as we see more examples of travel bubbles opening up, I'm sure you've heard about Australia, New Zealand creating a travel bubble. I think that's really encouraging.
For sure. And, it's not surprising to hear that there's such a different rate of recovery in different parts of the globe as that recovery sort of continues. And as you look towards the future of travel, what does returning to normal mean to you?
Yeah, this word normal. We discussed earlier that I'm an optimist, and I sometimes wonder if when people say like, "What does returning to normal mean to you?" or "What is a new normal?" Maybe just normal is constantly evolving. Our realities, both professionally and personally, have definitely changed. And I'm sure at some points during the past year and a half, it might have felt like that it changed for the worse. But now I think, despite the unfortunate health challenges in many regions, that there might be some silver linings. So returning to normal has more to do, I think, with a mindset focused on like innovation and appreciation to getting to a life that is meaningful to each individual. Brand-wise, returning to normal, it actually means kind of similar things. So around innovation, we're absolutely thinking about how do we offer the brand hallmarks that our guests love. So that's our breakfast, that's the sleep experience, that's a clean stay. How do we offer it while keeping in mind the context of the world today? And so innovating on those services and make sure that guests are getting value out of that experience and really just serving as a launch pad for the sort of experience that they want to go do, the memories that they want to create. And so just really thinking about how do we kind of apply that mindset and focus on this digital transformation and make sure that we're thinking about this in a way that's not how do we get back to pre-COVID, but how do we make our current experience today even better?
I love that idea. And I'm glad to see that you're channeling your inner optimist again when you think about the future. If you were to channel your inner prognosticator, what changes have you seen for travel during the pandemic that you think will carry through into the future?
Yes. I think one is, exploring locally. I think everyone this past year has discovered probably a new travel destination that they probably didn't know that they loved. And since they've gotten the opportunity to explore it, more people will try to appreciate their local environment. And so we're seeing an uptick in road trips naturally. There's also been a lot more last minute travel. So people, booking, 2 to 3 days in advance instead of 2 weeks in advance. And I think with people traveling more locally, they'll be more open to booking either a vacation that's 2 or 3 hours away or even a staycation. And so I think people are starting to see hotels as not just places you go when you're going on the annual vacation, but it's also the place you can go when you just need a day away from home. And so I think that's really exciting. I think there's going to be more choice around amenities. It's interesting when you lead a brand like Holiday Inn Express, you get to hear feedback from like all types of guests because you serve a diverse array of guests, and you'll hear some feedback that says, you know what, I'm glad housekeeping is not being offered daily because I hated it when they used to knock on my door every day, and I can clean up after myself. And then there are other people who, love the amenity and they're like, I actually want my housekeeping every day. I loved talking to them. They were always just so warm and friendly. I made me feel like I made me feel special when I was on the trip. And so what's great about that is I think we'll be offering our guests a lot more choice around some of these amenities instead of assuming what guests are looking for. I think we are going to see folks reinvesting in experiences and creating memories. I'm not sure if you've experienced this, Jeff, but I feel like a lot of folks are creating these new vacations or trips that are more like celebrate everything trips.
Yes.
We missed like grandma's birthday. We didn't get to celebrate this person's engagement. We didn't get to celebrate this person's promotion. Let's go on a trip and celebrate everything. And so I think as a society, we're investing in experiences more. And then, lastly, I think what's really interesting is, right now we're supposed to be talking about the future of travel, but the future of travel is very much connected to the future of work. If you think about pre-COVID, we used to talk about business and leisure travel. And then we may talk about leisure travel, which is when, a business traveler would go to a conference or go on a work trip and then add on a vacation, right? But now, really what we're talking about is when people do travel for work, how do we make sure that they're balancing their time at home? And so it's more of a how often are folks actually going to be traveling for work? And when they're not traveling for work, how do we make the experience coming to a hotel, how do we bring that to life, even in a leisure circumstance? And then I'm also hearing a lot about people turning things that used to be pretty like typical parts of the year. So whether or not it was like a soccer tournament or it was a work trip that somebody usually would just go for a day and come back, they're turning them into vacations. So I heard a term the other day, turnications. And I was like, wow, like so soccer moms are going on these tournament trips and adding a day or two to vacations. So I think we're going to start seeing people kind of flip it on its head when we talk about the future of travel, also talk about what does the future of work look like. And if folks are going into the office less, but when they do, they're likely spending a week on a work trip rather than a couple days. They're likely also going to add extended vacations to that as well. If folks are working remotely in more locations, that means that there's more of an opportunity when they do all get together to spend more time at hotels. We may have actually more days at a time stayed at a hotel, but maybe less frequent travel in some industries. And then, one thing that I think sometimes people think about when they talk about business travel, they'll often say, oh, well, business travel has been, cut significantly. There are still quite a few businesses that are traveling, and a lot of our essential workers that have been, so valuable, especially this past year, and doing a lot of really meaningful work. We've been serving a lot of those essential workers, a lot of these companies that provide us the products and services that are so needed. And so I think we'll continue to see growth in those areas, and we'll continue to see people evolve their travel habits as we evaluate what the future of work looks like.
Yeah, and I think the key theme there is really just the dramatic increase in the need for personalization at scale across the board. So it ties into everything that you were mentioning. And on the flip side, is there anything that's been really surprising to you about the recovery so far?
Yeah, surprising. I think the thing that actually sticks out to me most is just the fact that people have been forced to go through a journey of self-discovery, and I'm always interested to better understand what the outcome of that is. And I think for everyone it looks a little bit different. But I think what's most surprising is probably those that used to be a road warrior, and I'm one of them. I for many years I loved being on the road. I loved the business trip, and I think for many of us, we realized how much we really loved being home, and really loved just spending time locally, spending time with family. And I think you're seeing a lot of folks really appreciate some of the outcomes that have come from the pandemic, and just the discovery of your local environment. I think, for Holiday Inn Express, it's really interesting because our brand is such a well-loved brand. So every time I tell somebody about my job, there's always somebody who says like, oh my God, it's my favorite hotel because whenever I'm going on a road trip, I know exactly what I'm going to get. I know that it's going to be a positive experience. And what's interesting is when we look at some of our data, we find that a lot of our Holiday Inn Express customers, they earn their loyalty points with us, but they don't they're not actually earning them to go stay necessarily at another brand. They actually spend a lot of their loyalty points also with us, which actually tells you that there's just a genuine love for the brand, and travelers are getting their needs met for both like business and leisure purposes. And so I say that because I think what's been surprising about the recovery is we're seeing more and more of our guests, whether or not they tended to be loyal to Holiday Inn Express or another brand, choose Holiday Inn Express because we are in the right locations for the destinations that they're seeking to go to.
For sure. And I'm not surprised that you've been able to find yet another silver lining in there as well. We're running out of time. This is flying by, but before we move on to some of the audience Q&A and maybe talk about IHG for a minute, are there any other trends that are top of mind for you as it relates to the future of travel?
Yeah, I think I would just reiterate a couple real quickly that I think matter most. I think being globally minded, but very much focused on local. As I mentioned, we're very much focused on deeply understanding the customer needs and the customer journey across a lot of different regions, and also making sure that we're delivering our service given local regulations. And so this like globally minded and locally focused has been really important. I think the importance of creating a strong and cohesive digital experience and enabling limited contact or contactless solutions, that's something that you're continuing to see across our industry, and you'll see it at our brands. Leveraging data and insights for personalization. We talked a lot about this, but providing a lot of choice and flexibility, and that's not just for our guests, but it's also for our owners, making sure our owners know that we are partners with them and how they deliver the brand experience. And so I think those are the ones that are really top of mind as we start thinking about the future of travel.
For sure. I want to make sure we get to some of the questions from the audience as well. One came in here. It said, what ways is your brand working to stand out in the eye of the consumer?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think when you think about the brand hallmarks for Holiday Inn Express, you think about the sleep experience, where we have a customizable sleep experience. So making sure we have the highest quality bedding and making sure that the room is at our IHG Way of Clean standard. I think breakfast is often where we stand out most. So everyone often mentions the cinnamon rolls, which I will tell you have gotten better feedback than a lot of other branded cinnamon rolls. So next time you're at Holiday Inn Express, please check it out. But our breakfast is very much well known, and it's something that we see as a hallmark, and we are actively thinking about how we can continue to offer a new breakfast offering that meets the needs of our guests, but also takes into account social distancing and all the requirements that we need to consider to keep our customers safe. And then lastly, I think when you enter a Holiday Inn Express, one thing that I think not a lot of people know about is our Formula Blue 2.0 design that is very much design forward, has a contemporary aesthetic, with lots of fresh color, but meets the needs of guests. And I think one thing as you enter into a new Holiday Inn Express, I think our owners see it because that's why we've grown to almost 3,000 hotels globally, but our guests see it too, that it's a value-rich experience with a great design and all the essentials that we have to offer.
Great. I think we're almost out of time here, but I want to make sure that we touch on this amazing initiative that IHG recently launched called Journey to Tomorrow, which is a 10-year action plan to help reshape the future of responsible travel. Can you please just briefly talk about that initiative?
Sure. So I also love Journey for Tomorrow. I think as you think about Journey Tomorrow, you really want to focus on the fact that it's really a way for us to make sure that we are delivering on being a company and a brand that represents true hospitality for good. And there are 5 areas in which we focus on that. One, it's our people. So how do we champion a diverse culture where everyone can thrive? 2, communities. How do we improve the lives of 30 million people in our communities around the world? And then 3, around carbon and energy. How do we reduce our energy use and carbon emissions in line with the climate science? And waste is our 4th one. So how do we be a pioneer to transform and make sure that we are a minimal waste hospitality industry leader? And then water. How do we ensure we are conserving water and helping to secure water access in those areas of greatest risk? Lastly, I just want to make sure that I emphasize Journey Tomorrow is a 10-year action plan to shape the future of responsible travel. And one thing that we learned in surveying our employees, but also surveying our guests, is that everyone knows that this is incredibly important to be a leader in this area. So 82% of our guests say they choose a hotel brand that operates responsibly. 60% of people say that the pandemic has made them more socially and environmentally conscious about their impact in the world when traveling.
Yep.
And this whole idea of thinking globally, but making sure that you have the local community in mind. 86% of our guests say it's important for them to know the local community. And so given all these factors, we're super excited about Journey Tomorrow and our investment in communities around the world.
That's amazing. I think Ariel might be here to give us the red light.
What a
Awesome.
great note to
Thank
end
you so
on.
much, Jeff.
Thank you guys so much for joining us today. What an awesome conversation. Stephanie, I loved what you said about choice in the consumer experience at your hotels. So resonated with me. I recently stayed at a hotel and was confused about whether or not the housekeeping was coming or not. And it's such a great initiative to have choice.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ariel. Great
Thank
connecting,
you very
Jeff.
much, Stephanie.
Thank you. With that, we will bring on our next 2 speakers for the day. We have Wendy Olsen Killian, the Global SVP and General Manager for Expedia Group, moderated by Ken Mooring, the Director of QSR, Healthcare, and Travel and Hospitality at Newstar. Welcome.
Hi, Ariel. Thank you. It's
How
exciting
are
to
you
be here.
today?
Very well.
Just getting on, guys. I should be able to get there. Oh, there we are. How are you guys today?
Great. All right, I'll leave it to you both.
Awesome. Thank you. Good morning, Wendy.
Hi, Ken. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your sensitivity to my time zone. So the Expedia Group spans over 14 of the world's largest travel brands internationally. Who doesn't know Expedia? Today we welcome Wendy Olsen Killian, who is Global Senior Vice President and GM of Expedia Group Media Solutions at Expedia. We welcome you into the conversation. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. You can call me Wendy okay, because I'm not great, but I'm okay, just to lessen everyone's expectations. And it's just easier to, or walk, because we all need more acronyms in our lives, right?
Yes, there's not enough. I think you're on this panel because you're more than okay, but we'll press on. So you've had a very interesting career trajectory, both prior to joining Expedia and in your 11 years working at the company. Can you talk a little bit about the path that led you to this global expansive role?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the compliment. I like to tell a little bit of a story in that, I've been around the United States in different types of marketing roles, all online. I like to say at the beginning, the turn of the century, this thing called the internet, my career was there and has been there the whole time, first in automotive and then in travel. And as I was, a recruiter called it the salmon effect. So when you live in the Northwest, when you grow up in the Northwest, you eventually go back and spawn. You come back to the Northwest and you have kids. And so that's a great analogy. And then the fish die. So let's end that analogy. So that was our path. Having lived all over the US, came back, wanted to be in the Northwest, really loved automotive, but saw travel as, an option in Seattle that I hadn't had in some of the previous locations. And so took the jump there. And my background up until, really that point had all been in online product management. And I wanted to do that again. So we kept doing that in travel and really had an amazing journey as I got to manage all of our different products that we had on the advertising side, because we are the advertising business, if you will, that connects people within Expedia to our wonderful audience. What I found out is it's a matching problem, right? This is what product's always been. It's this macro matching problem. You take the consumers, you take the advertisers, you put them together in the right way at the right time with the right message. Well, what I found out is when I was on the road, because I started my career at JD Power and I love data. I'm a big data nerd and I like to present it. So I would go out and I would present some of our great research. I started talking to our partners and I could do the matching problem at a micro level in a partner facing role and get to work with an amazing team of trusted advisors to the industry. So I moved over to more of a client facing sales oriented role. And then about 6 months ago, I got the opportunity to bring it all together and look after the whole business. So that's my journey. It's been amazing. It is my dream job for sure.
Well, that's amazing and very prescient by you that you're able to figure that out. But as that love for data and that kind of that matching concept you talked about, really applies to a number of industries. But what do you love about the travel business in particular?
I love the impact, right? You can take the Mark Twain quote about, just really breaking down biases. Travel's the only thing you purchase that makes you richer is the other quote that I always love. And so one, I love the consumer element of travel. I love to travel, just as we heard in the previous speaker as well. Like I love to travel. I think about the impact we can have on communities. I think of the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, for example, after the oil spill and the things that we were able to do to come together and bring more people into that region and, help the community itself, but then also help travelers to understand a new part of the world. So generally, it's just such a world-altering industry.
Interesting example. And you've spent 11 years at Expedia, which is, I would say, atypical these days. What's the secret of maintaining that career trajectory, taking on new roles and kind of moving up into the right at one company?
It's a good question. I will say, when you look at the tenure at Expedia, people stay there a long time because we have an amazing culture. And we, again, like I said, we're in an amazing industry. So, on our team, we have employee number 96, for example. So my 11 years is puny to many, but we have had a lot of new talent join, which is fantastic as well. And it's that confluence of knowing where we've been and then the new views, which is what makes us so strong as a company. What I will say is networking is so critically important. Getting to know people, understanding their goals and what they need and how you can work together to achieve those has probably been the singular most important thing in growing my career and keeping top of mind and also being very clear on what job I wanted. My predecessor took this job and I think in maybe our second meeting, I said, I want your job. How do I get your job? Right? When you're done with it, not right now. But it was then all of that planning of saying, okay, well, I need areas here, I need here. And development of people is really important to us at Expedia and making sure that we get people all of those building blocks. So when the opportunity comes available, they're ready for it.
Oh, that's very refreshing. The career pathing aspect is always critical to that culture, I believe, that you discussed earlier. And what did you learn in the auto space that you were able to leverage in your roles at Expedia?
Automotive and travel, at first you could see some of the similarities, but as I got into it more, there's so many similarities. They're highly considered, highly researched purchases. For most people, they don't happen very often. They're expensive, so you spend a ton of time mostly researching it. Listings is research. Right? You have, what can I afford? Can I afford a Cadillac or a Subaru? Can I, afford, Eastern Washington State or Cancun, or what are these different factors that go in? And it's fun to watch how travelers use the sites. So in a lot of ways, those were very, very similar. I would say some of the biggest differences is around the types of advertising. Conquest versus convincing and things like that were a bit different between the two industries.
Sure.
But generally speaking, it's just the way that people research, buy, and eventually use the product. I'd say one of the biggest differences that I didn't expect, I thought, well, a car is so much more expensive than a trip for most people, right? As we look at this. And I thought people would be more serious about the car. But the big factor is there's lemon laws. You can take the car back if it's not good. You can't take those vacation days back. You can't replace that feeling of walking into the wrong property that you should not have booked. Right? So there's that personal aspect of travel that actually makes it even more serious as people are shopping.
That's interesting. That's true. And as a father, if the vacation is not planned well, we know who gets the blame. Now, we talked about, your really expansive role at Expedia, overseeing product engineering, strategy, operations, and partner-facing teams. How do you balance your time across those various teams and countless initiatives?
You hire very well. I mean, that's really the ticket is you hire the right people leading, and you hire the right people in the roles. You empower them, you trust them, and you get out of their way, and then you take care of them. That's how you balance it. You make better leaders.
Now, I know you're not in the city these days. You're back on the farm where you grew up. But you mentioned on LinkedIn that you have a big cherry harvest every year. Last year, there would be some big aha moments you mentioned. What did you learn? And are these the big Rainier cherries that I've heard so much about and have never tried?
We can go into a whole variety of cherries, because it's one thing is you can probably name 10 varieties of apples, and you can probably name sweet red cherries and Rainier cherries. Well, in the sweet red cherries, there's 10 different varieties. So we focus more on the sweet reds. Skinas are the big ones for us, but it was an amazing experience in getting back to the roots. We brought a lot of technology. And so a lot of my teams, we always say, how do we eliminate our roles? In this instance, I am going to be in every harvest from here until all out. I think I have my vacation planned in July every year from here on out to do this, because the technology piece, I've been kind of running that harvest management. The big ahas, when we implemented that technology, there were vendors we didn't even look at because of their pricing and their models, right? And they might have a more superior product, but because they couldn't explain the product and they led with the pricing and everything, weren't even considered. So I thought that was an interesting element. Be great to the people that are making the work happen, right? Because we could have an amazing cherry crop, but without people to pick it, you don't have anything, right? And so just really focusing on that. Go pick. It hurts. It's hard, right? Remember what people are doing to make your business work and appreciate them even more for that piece. Failure is not an option. It wasn't NASA, but when a linchpin comes off of a tractor and it's got to be going and you have no time to put it to the shop, a nice piece of wood will work. Just you make it whatever happens. And then I'd say finally, teamwork. What I observed is everyone was so singularly focused on the result that there was no me, or what does this mean for me? Or how do everyone just did it, right? Whatever job was there, they did it to get it done because they were singularly focused on the result of the harvest.
That's interesting, and I have a number of follow-up questions, but I don't believe the brand innovator people nor the audience will be very happy with me if I dive more deeply into agriculture. So let's switch back to Expedia. You have a ton of data at your fingertips, or that you can mine and share with your partners. What data points are most surprising to you, or were most surprising to you during the pandemic?
Yeah, so many. We adapted a lot of our reports because as behaviors changed and how quickly we were able to see in real time as things were happening, right? Initially, everyone was coming to our sites to change and cancel their trips. right? And then what are the knock-on effects of that has been over the last, 14 months has been fascinating. And, now that we have credits, everybody's credits, they may be expiring, they're not expiring, but, how does that work? We have some other different, knock-on effects. What I would say is, we just recently, earlier this week, released a travel recovery and trend report that you can get on our website, advertising.expedia.com. And that's where we're kind of talking about some of the future, but we're also bringing in a lot of the data that we already have had. Vaccines, right? 1 in 3 Americans have already planned to take a vacation to celebrate being vaccinated. I already took mine, right? And it was amazing. 60% of domestic searches right now are 0 to 21 days out, right? And people are doing that. International travel, we are seeing international travel, coming back, but 30% of those searches are 91 days plus, right? And so seeing how the trends and the seasonality has changed and all of those things, we're seeing longer vacations. Verbo travelers are 75% more likely to book at least a 7-night stay. So we see people making up for that lost time. Domestic, 62% of global travelers, they're saying that they're going to stay close, right? And we're also seeing that road trip being a big part of it, right? So looking at all of these different data, and sharing that out at a very personalized level, whether it be for a property or an airline or a destination, and sharing that out, but just seeing how quickly the seasonality is changing. And is there seasonality? We can't apply the old data to the current situation.
Yes, it's, particularly in the booking windows, the change has been really interesting to view from our perspective. For our virtual audience, what advice would you have about how they can get the most out of their data for marketing purposes?
I think many of us are in a very fortunate position to have first-party data, right? And if you have first-party data, definitely use that as much as possible to understand what your audience is doing and how their behavior is changing. If you don't, or you want to supplement that, my biggest thing is work with partners who have first-party data. Work with partners who have real people in their systems that can augment or share a different view. One example I use a lot with destinations, when you look at our platform and our audience, you may have a destination who you think who you're competing against, right? You've had this competitive set all of these different times. Go check with your partners who have data. We see actually various, very different competitive sets. And those competitive sets are changing dramatically during the pandemic, right? Where you maybe have very set competitors historically. Now you may be competing with, Yakima, Washington, which I hope you are, because we have wonderful wine and beer here.
That's the word on the street, for sure. So, and what advice do you have for marketers who to use that data to best understand the impact of their own marketing programs?
Yeah, and I think it ties really closely to something you and I were talking about when we spoke earlier around conversion, right? Understanding your goal. What is your goal in that marketing, right? If it's conversion, work with people who have the conversions. And that's some of the biggest changes that we've seen is, especially with some of the destinations who have wanted to have much more type of influence in, distributing travelers in their country or distributing travelers within their state, or looking at some of that. They want to be closer and closer to the transaction because the number of transactions were a lot smaller in the last year for those who are traveling. So understanding the goals, understanding what you're doing, and then working with partners who can show you those results. Like for us, we can show organic booking rates and marketing assisted booking rates. We can do that incrementality testing on our platform. And I think that those types of partnerships are really important, and lean into your partnerships is a key element that we've seen.
Gotcha. And, here, not to plug Newstar, but, one of our core focus is helping partners understand the pathways to conversion. But in data, as you are well aware, the negative it can be as important as the positive. How much time do you spend, or how important is non-converting pathways to shape your travel marketing?
Well, travel is very emotional, right? Travel is a decision now. People are making it more quickly now as we see those booking windows continue to be compressed, but it's very emotional, and you have to get that element of, all right, I want to travel, right? And that's one of the things we do is it's our job to get people off the couch, right? And get people back into, being comfortable in their communities, and then being comfortable in traveling and being comfortable in bringing that and making that window bigger and bigger. And so it's absolutely critical that we think about those things, right? And that we think about the non-converting pathways. Content is queen again, right? Like as you think about when it's, fallen out of favor, come back into favor, all these different things. We have had a great year and opportunity to inspire people. And now they're going to convert, right? Now that things are opening up, like it's been an interesting study in it this last year because it's been more important than ever.
Yeah, and to that end, last year you launched the What's Next campaign with kind of immersive images and images around images around the world. Can you give us a look behind the curtain there? What was the impetus for the campaign, and are there any learnings that from the campaign that you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was paired just a few weeks after a campaign that we did that was a hashtag campaign across the platforms that was Travel Through Memories. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to get people looking back, having those emotions and thinking about all those times and great things and putting those pictures out there. And there were a lot of these types of initiatives that were happening at the time. And we got a lot of interaction, right? That was our goal. No brand play, just like remember how you felt to travel. And then we turned that closely with, where next, what's next, to get people to start thinking about what that next trip was. But we wanted to ground them in the piece there. And the real reason we did it is to help the communities and help our partners. So we knew our partners didn't have any, had very limited marketing dollars at that time. It wasn't a super effective time for them to be marketing and tying it back, but we wanted to keep their communities top of mind for our customers and for travelers. And so that was the biggest impetus for doing this. And we all wanted to dream. We all wanted to dream about what that next trip was. And so the way that the platform worked is you could go in and you could type a location and you could get some just really immersive images. And it was really as simple as that. But there was also a surprise me type button, right? You tell me. And the level of interaction with that surprise me button, people were staying on the sites just looking at an image of a location for very extended periods of time. And the amount of people, the time they spent was surprising to me, the number of searches they did, and then just how many people were engaging with that surprise me was fantastic.
Nice. That's great. And you've also reached, you've made this decision to support the destination marketing organizations, or DMOs, as we call them in the travel industries, with a $25 million initiative to support them. What has been the impact?
Yeah, this was actually part of a larger Expedia Group organizational effort. So we were over, I believe, $300 million that we put back into the industry to help our partners. And one of the things that key is they are our partners. We want to be there for them in good times and bad, just as they're there for us in good times and bad. And so that was critically important as we thought about that. We had the opportunity financially to give back, and that's what we wanted to do. The way that tourism boards and destination marketing organizations, they are so critically important to this industry. And you don't sell a destination, but you can't sell travel without a destination, right? So you can't go on to a listing and say, I'm going to buy Reno. But what you do know is, what do I have? What can I do in those locations? And that's what's going to define if I buy a flight, hotel, a vacation rental, et cetera, in those destinations. So what I would say is we wanted to give back to them because they are so important to their communities. They were struggling. They weren't part of the initial funding that came out from the government. So they were having even more limited time and treasure and resources and team members. And so we wanted to do whatever we could to help them. The result we have closer partnerships, right? They know we're here. We're not just trying to make a buck. We really are trying to travel the world better, and that's what we're going to continue to do. And so I think that's the biggest impact that we've had. We've also had, on the hotel side, we had a lot of interaction with products that maybe they hadn't used before because we were giving them complimentary. And that's helped them rebound and drive bookings, much quicker, I think, coming out of into the recovery.
That's great. And it seems like you guys both deserve and need to play a key role in this recovery. So it's refreshing to see that. Now, with regards to the consumer, we're hopefully coming out of this pandemic. It feels as though consumer behavior has changed massively, whether that's the way they spend their money, the way they browse the internet, and everything in between. For travel marketers, they probably had models and paradigms before. Are they starting at square one again, or is everything kind of tangential to where it was before? Or how are you looking at the notion of knowing your consumer these days?
Yeah, it's a great question. What I would say is everything you knew before, remember it, and then go figure out what it means now, right? So there's definitely like tweaking the algorithm. Look at real-time data as much as possible, right? Because what we saw is announcements out of specific countries at any given time totally changes the shopping and researching. Our site traffic after a announcement can go through the roof in those points of sale, right? And it's how do you be first and foremost in front of that and ready to take advantage of that when you don't really know when it's going to happen, right? And that's where I think it's be live on some of these platforms, understand what it is, be able to ramp up and down as things are changing. One of the things that we've done is provide a lot more flexibility of moving campaigns around as the world has changed, but work with people who have that real-time data to be able to tell you the trends and can action it, essentially immediately as we think about ramping up and down.
I gotcha. And as those changes have occurred, how do you think about content alignment against all these changes? Is that still, the old test and learn, or how is that working?
Well, it's interesting. And I say that in that, so we have gone through kind of a major brand refresh, right? You've seen likely the Brand Expedia campaign that we relaunched. We're really excited about the results of that, live with the Oscars and everything else that we've done. We've also taken a look at what are the brand, value propositions across our portfolio. And we are actually leaning into less real-time tweaks and more genuinely going back to the heart of these brands, right? And finding that tone that resonates with the brand, that's resonating with the right consumers. Through that, we're doing a lot of creative testing, both on the ads on our platform and ads off of our platform and everything that we're doing. I think it's just, as we've all had this pandemic, it's that time to be more genuine and go back to your roots. And I think that's what we're doing as a brand in our messaging as well.
Gotcha. That sounds very reasonable and exciting too.
It's great because usually I don't sound that reasonable again.
Well, that's okay, Wendy, or Wendy, okay. Now, when I wrote this question, my thinking has evolved since I wrote this question. But when it comes to the marketing funnel, I guess when I wrote this, I was thinking about whether or not the marketing funnel even exists, and is it now just a spiral? But maybe a shame spiral for some of us, hopefully not. But how are you thinking about the disruption and the funnel? Is it 3-4 funnels like it was before? Or is it broken up into 25 different micro funnels? How are you thinking about it?
Yeah, I have two favorite analogies about the death of the funnel. The spiral, I hadn't heard so much. That scares me a little bit. But the two that I love the most, my parents are actually beekeepers. That's their main trade and has been. And so it's the honeybee, right? It's, as you think about the pollinators and they go around an orchard and they go around and do these things, that's the shopper today, right? When you have 40 tabs over 3 windows open and you're doing all these different things, and our multitasking brains, as we've been sitting in front of these, machines for the last year. And I think of it more as a bumblebee, or the other, we have a great partner in Canada who describes it as an atom, right? And as things are all moving around and as we are moving around in our shopping, I think it's critically important that you're in as many places as you can be in that, right? So working with the right partners who can get you as close to the purchase as possible, but also is getting you in that, top of mind as a consumer, so they know as they're going throughout this that your name exists and that your brand exists and that what you're doing exists. So and it depends on the product too, right? The way that people shop for travel, for the most part, things have changed because we see more reliance on the car. But you buy your flight, then you buy your hotel or your vacation rental, right? Some of that's shifting. But like when we think about destinations, like where you have to be top of mind at the very beginning, because everything kind of goes on from there. So in some ways there's still an element of this and then these things, but then generally you're still competing against this, attention span of a gnat that we humans now have.
Yeah, and I'll, as much as I'm tempted to continue with the honeybee analogy, I'll spare you and your parents and the audience. Now, when it comes, I'm sorry.
I was just laughing. We'll have a whole Ag 101 later.
Yes, that's another brand innovator conference. When it comes to intent signals, and this is where I'm trying to use the B and I won't. I'm sure you had some very reliable intent signals in the past. Have they changed and shifted, or are they still fairly static? How are you and your partners thinking about that?
It's a great question. And one of the things that we often, and I know that you have this challenge as well, is we have so much data, right? Petabytes or whatever that, I get the words wrong, but however many bytes of this, but what do you use? I go back to real time as much as possible, right? And when we think about our travelers, right, we can catch them off site, but when someone's shopping for travel on our platform, we know exactly what they're doing. We know what they're thinking. Now, they may be looking at Niagara Falls and Cancun at the same time, and those are very different, but we know kind of their date range. We know when you need to fill rooms. We know all of those different points about these people, and we can be accretive to their travel journey as we bring in the messages and sometimes discounts and other things as we bring it and present it. So for me, it's all about the real-time element of getting in front of people while they're thinking about your category, while they're thinking about doing and buying what you have. That to me is the holy grail. That's the gold that we can provide, and they're the strongest intent signals you'll ever get.
Gotcha. And how much, does education play a part in this as we have various and new consumer concerns when it comes to travel?
Yeah, it's something that we have been doing intercept studies with shoppers on our site. I mean, we have throughout this pandemic, our traffic may be down, the number of shoppers we may have been down during the heart of the pandemic, but people were still coming to shop for travel, right? There were still people out there throughout that whole time. And so when we think about the signals that we're getting and how we're moving them along, it's critically important. Just as we're watching that, when we were doing the intercepts, we were trying to really understand what was on their mind. And we found, this is the most recent from our travel recovery and trend report, is 4 in 5 travelers are expected, they're going to make accommodation decisions based on implemented pandemic measures. Cleanliness.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. And so what we found is, don't use masks in your ads. People don't want to see that. Don't use, hand sanitizer. It's not a real big converter, but use the wide open spaces, use the clean, that cleanliness feel, and talk about what you're doing. That's critically important.
Gotcha. And we're getting, it really feels like, and I, hope that I'm right, we're right, that it feels like we're coming out of the morass of 2020. But can you share a positive outcome or opportunity you've seen emerge from all the uncertainties from 2020?
I think generally it's the appreciation of travel. It's something that we took so for granted, and the people around us, right? The first vacations are happening not where are you going, it's who are you going to see, or who are you going with? Like the centering of people centric travel. And then you get to choose these amazing locations. And then now we're seeing a lot of those first trips have happened. I don't know if you've been on an airplane lately, but I haven't been on an undersold flight. I've been on oversold flights, every single plane I've been on. And so those trips are happening, and now they're going, where are we going next? All right, we're catching up with people. And so I think it's just that evolution of the appreciation, and that pent-up demand is so big.
Yes, it feels that way. And that kind of blends into the question of, if you're a travel marketer and you're thinking about, should I take a wait and see and focus my 2021 budget towards the back half of the year, or should I be jumping in with both feet now to try to snare and capture as much of that demand now as opposed to waiting?
I think that the answer to that is it depends. Get with people who have the data to help you make those decisions. Like that's what we've been talking about with a lot of our partners over, the last year. And we just, we knew there was nothing to be bought, but we were meeting to say, okay, this is what we're seeing. What are you seeing? Okay, let's talk about what does this mean for your plans? What does this mean for your goals? And we've been meeting with people very regularly to continue to share that updated information. Some markets are sold out already for the summer. So if you haven't booked your vacations for the summer, I would highly encourage you to go book them, because prices are going up, just as our CEO warns would happen. But some are already sold out. So what are you going to do to achieve your goals? We think seasonality is going to look different than it has in the past, because people are going to be willing to travel more in the second half of the year in times than then maybe they wouldn't have traveled. Maybe they were priced out or too late on the summer destinations they wanted to go to. Maybe they're going to add those into the second half. So get with people, get the data. If you're not having the conversation, start having them with your partners, whether it be us or anyone. Like just get the data and get going, because the time is real. The roaring 20s of travel are here.
Gotcha. We're almost at time, and I have to go book my summer vacation immediately. But you one last question for you. You said you went on a vacation already. I wanted to ask you, what would your first non-business trip be post quarantine, and how did it feel? But you've already done it. Where did you go, and was it awesome, or tell us?
Well, I did travel during the quarantine, I will say, or not the quarantine, the pandemic. My husband is an airline pilot, as you can see by the planes behind me. So he was out in it the whole time. So we kind of felt like we could go out and be in it too. Our first trip was to northern Wisconsin to see my sister and her family. That was very much the who. We hadn't seen them, and we wanted to see them. And so we went for Halloween. That was amazing. And then this last week, I went with two dear friends to Palm Springs. And I would like to say I flew in and I flopped, but, I had a little bit of work to do, but just the food, the sun, and it was amazing talking to business owners there and seeing the rebound that they've truly had in Q1, and that they're up above 2019 numbers for Q1 is an awesome thing to see. And it felt fantastic.
That's great. And where to this summer?
I actually have like 7 tabs open right now of different destinations. My kids just want to be somewhere where it's warm and where there's pools. And so I'm trying to pick. I don't want to throw those out there because I might get some emails from people I don't have in my consideration set yet or trying to convince me. But I look forward to the marketing that's going to convince me to pick one.
Gotcha. I remember when my kids were little, we took them to Puerto Rico, rainforest, bioluminescence, all this cool stuff. I pulled them on the way home and said, what was your favorite part? And they said, the pool. We could have gone to the Sheraton in Weehawken and saved a lot of money. But, that was my post-trip survey.
I was at the Hyatt Regency in Renton over the weekend for the pool, so I can understand.
It was actually VRBO or Verbo way back when. Ariel's here to give us the hook, it looks like.
Hello. Do you have any parting thoughts? I'll leave you with another minute.
From my side, I think this has been great. There's a lot more to discuss. I think, part of it is the impact of vaccinations and how that will play. That's kind of a political question, and I consider that I'm neutral. But how do you think that will play in air travel, hotel stays, etc.?
Yeah, it's something we're watching closely from the political aspect and the allowance and the passports and things like that. What I will say is every person I've talked to who has been vaccinated talk about the emotional elements and the relief and the excitement. And we see travel searches tie into vaccination rates. A lot of the first things people are doing after they're vaccinated is going and searching for travel. Where am I going? I'm ready to go. I've been here too long. Porto Backyardo is no longer where I want to go. I want to go somewhere else. So it's like, that's what they're doing.
That's funny. It feels like there's a geo-targeting opportunity there. as you develop the data from the CDC. Well, thank you very much, Wendy. Learned a lot. I hope the audience has learned a lot. Ariel, thank you for the opportunity.
This has been such a fantastic discussion. Wendy, I'm super excited to read that report you talked about earlier in the chat.
Excellent. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Ariel. Have a great day.
Thank you. With that, please welcome the next two speakers on the stage. We have two amazing marketers joining us today. Rachel Mansfield, the Vice President of Marketing at Getaway, which will be moderated by Joe Hall, the co-founder and COO at Spaceback. Welcome.
Hi.
All right, I'm on. How you doing?
Good. How are you, Joe?
Great. Good to see you again today. Thank you, Ariel. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
My name is Joe Hall. I'm really excited to have Rachel Mansfield here today, the VP of Marketing from Getaway. I think as a marketer, obviously the future of travel and Getaway is a very fascinating company, but I think even as a consumer, thinking about my future travel plans, as I'm sure everybody is already, this is going to be a very exciting talk. So I'm going to pass it over to Rachel in just 1 second. I'll introduce myself. My name is Joe Hall. I'm one of the co-founders and COO of Spaceback. Spaceback is a creative automation platform that's designed to make it super easy for brands and marketers to distribute their social media posts and traditional banner ad placements. It's a better experience for the end consumer, better results for the brand. It's a win-win. So please check us out at spaceback.com. A quick agenda before I pass it over to Rachel. After she introduces herself, we're going to do a dive on travel, Getaway, and at the end, we'll have some time for some Q&A. So please submit questions along the way. And with that, I'll pass it off to Rachel.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here today. I am the VP of Marketing at Getaway, as Joe said, and I've been with the company for about 3.5 years, which is crazy. It really has flown by. In that time, we went from 3 outposts to 15 all across the country. And the marketing team has grown from 1 to about 10, which is also really exciting. And under marketing, we have growth and brand and graphic design. So kind of our own little internal studio, if you will.
Awesome. That's great. Definitely looking forward to learning more about that. Sounds like you've had a great couple of years. Yeah. Before we dive in, let's quick couple icebreakers, since I'm kind of in the social media space and we all will pass through that with the marketing. What is another travel brand or company that you kind of follow on social media sort of what platform and what do you like about that company and why do you follow on?
Honestly, every single time before I book a trip, I go to tablet hotels, the OTA. I don't necessarily book on tablet, but I always use it for my discovery platform, and their social media always drives me as well into, they just have such high design boutique hotels and just exactly the way that I want to travel. So.
Awesome. That's a good tip for all of us. So thank you for sharing that with us from an industry expert. What about upcoming travel plans? Anything exciting on the horizon that you're looking forward to?
I have a lot that I'm looking forward to. I'm actually going to Philadelphia next weekend, so not very far, but we're going to go to a baseball game and go to some other museums. And I have a big trip to Greece planned this summer.
All right. That's awesome. I look forward to hearing about that. I'm still trying to lock in my travel plans. I think prior to this, one of the panelists said that the kind of prices are going up, so everybody should start looking into that. Looks like you're planned ahead, which is good.
I've planned as far as my Thanksgiving trip, so I am eager to be traveling.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Rachel, I know that I think there may be a video. I'm not sure if we want to cue that up. Going into kick things off, or is it?
Let's do it now. I think it's great to kind of get a visual understanding of what Getaway is instead of just me talking about it.
Great.
Your behavior is not something that can be separated from the behavior of the world around you. The external world is your own body extended. Each one of us are what you might call symptoms of the state of the universe as a whole. And I and my environment, you and your environment are explicitly as different could be. But implicitly, you go together. Fundamentally and forever, that which you really are is the whole of being.
So I think this video really shows and encapsulates what Getaway is. It's simple, it's well designed, it's beautiful, it's in nature, it is not about, itineraries of all the places you have to go and hit and the maps that go along with it and everything you're going to do on your trip. It's just about getting into nature and unplugging and maybe exploring some nearby trails, but really just having a fire and disconnecting. All of our cabins have those big picture windows. Some of you may have seen them on Instagram. I hear that a lot. But notably, we have no TVs, no Wi-Fi, we have cell phone lock boxes. So we're really encouraging our guests to disconnect. And some of the biggest differentiators are our guests travel there by car, so road trips and super dog friendly. Our cabins are naturally socially distanced, which is not a phrase I ever thought I would say 15 months ago. But all of our guests have their own private space. There's no communal spaces. There's never been a check-in or check-out desk. It's really about having your own little refuge. And another notable thing is that in 2020, we had nearly 100% occupancy, which I know is a little unique in the travel space. And prior to COVID, we were about 95% occupied since launch. So.
Awesome. I wish I could do a show of hands because I personally wasn't familiar with Getaway prior to this, but it seems a little bit more of a, maybe this is the wrong description, but sort of non-traditional, right? Like the talk prior to this, people are thinking about getting on planes, people are thinking travel, they're thinking places they've always already been. Getaway fills maybe a different niche or a different consumer need. You touched on a little bit of that and what the experience is like, maybe from like a company standpoint. I'd love to hear about like maybe a little bit of history of the company, maybe the brand values, and then also what brought you to Getaway.
Yeah. So we like to think about Getaway as being like a health and wellness hospitality company. So a little different than just hospitality. There's really a lot of that practice and mindfulness that is a part of going to Getaway and putting your devices down and just connecting with the person that you're with. The company was started in 2015 by John Staff, who is our founder and CEO. And after a few startup jobs at, I think, his late 20s, he was already feeling really burnt out. And he grew up in northern Minnesota and was just like really wanted to get back into the woods, so built one of these for himself, and immediately just had so much interest and realized that, wow, like getting into nature is so restorative and something that so many people want to do. So from that, we've grown over the last 5 or 6 years from 3 cabins to just about 600. And we're outside of 15 major cities. All of the getaway outposts is what we call our kind of collections of cabins, are within 2 hours of major cities. And yeah, I think you asked about brand pillars, right?
Yeah, just, yeah.
Okay. So our brand pillars are that we believe in free time. We believe that joy is found when we slow down and wander and marvel at the world. We believe that nature is for everyone. This one's really important to us. We think that nature is a restorative refuge that should be welcome to all people. And we believe in strengthening our relationships, so nurturing our connection to ourselves and others. So really, if you boil it down, it comes down to the 3 things that you need are time and nature and love.
That's awesome. I know you mentioned health and wellness, which I think is, so other travel destinations talk about that, but I think, like you said, there's something really unique about making free time. I can't remember exactly how you said that, but that's something that it caught me as really unique to your offering.
Yeah, and reading surveys, and 75% of us are craving more time outside, and 41% of Americans say they don't have enough time to do the things that they want to do. So while we're kind of circling around this idea of free time the last few years, I'd say in the last few months in 2021, we've really laser focused, oh, that's exactly what it is. We believe the world's become too busy and too noisy and too connected. And what we really think we're in the mission of is making space in the world for more free time.
So I think that, we talked about planning ahead, planning for travel, airlines, all this stuff. You guys have sort of a different approach because you're located close to cities, so you don't have to plan an airline ticket. You can find accommodations. A couple questions on that is sort of how far in advance you have to book. You mentioned you guys are pretty sold out, so maybe we're late on the game here, but there is something very unique about some degree of spontaneity with this as well.
Yeah, that's a big internal struggle for us. Is our, ideal is it could be a Thursday, and at 1 o'clock you're like, oh, I'm just so stressed, I gotta get out of here. And by 3 o'clock you could be checking into a cabin. But we have a lot of demand and are really working on having our supply match that. So I recommend, if I have friends that want to book for weekends, probably 2 to 3 months in advance, but weekdays you can usually find current month.
All right, that's helpful. I'm definitely talked about this prior, but definitely going to check you all out. In fact, I probably would have done this from a getaway, except like you said, no Wi-Fi, so couldn't do that.
No Wi-Fi.
I can personally vouch. I think all of us have. I just got back actually from the Grand Canyon, 9 days on the river, no cell phone, no Wi-Fi. I think we all recognize the importance of that. I think even though we know it, sometimes it's hard to do that. What's some of the kind of customer experiences and positive feedback and anything from that perspective that you can share with us?
We honestly just received the most heartfelt feedback from our guests. The stories that they send to us are just stop you in your tracks. And one of the norms as a company is every morning when we sign online, everyone reads every piece of guest feedback that we received overnight, which now that we have 15 outposts takes a little longer than it used to, but it's such an important practice. And I wanted to share a note that we got from a guy named Jason who came to our Houston outpost with his partner. And I thought I wanted to share it because I thought what he wrote is just the perfect example of what we're all about. So he said, in the morning, we had coffee and talked on a level we hadn't done in years. No distractions, just able to focus on being present with each other. We took 1 or 2 short naps in the cozy bed, plucked around on our guitar, and just enjoyed a lazy day. We returned afterwards full of energy and envisioned how we might bring some of that getaway feel to our daily life. We can't wait for the next one. So it's just a perfect example of what we want to bring into the world. Free time to do what you want, to reflect, to spend time connecting with your partner, to talk, to read, to nap, to hike, and just be.
There's definitely something that resonates from, like you said, creating space for free time and the ability to sort of let your mind wander and your relationships kind of grow and go where they may, instead of the constant time pressure. So that was definitely definitely connected a chord with me.
And we kind of like to think of Getaway as more of a practice than a vacation. So, you might go once and have this amazing experience, but if you add it into your wellness routine and maybe go once a quarter, or twice a year, or even every year you go this first weekend in January, and that's your weekend that you go and talk about your intentions for the year. Just kind of creating more thought around that and really setting aside time to be in nature and disconnect and connect with yourself or with your others. Or we hear from a lot of parents that it's the only time they see their kids not looking down at screens and sitting around campfires, teaching them how to make s'mores and talking about memories they had growing up. So
it's just definitely so hard to make space these days. I think that you're right there. There's kind of this micro travel, micro vacation, almost like creating more space for this. I've seen people's like sort of obviously patterns change over the last year. And it definitely seems like there could be like sort of a lot of repeat trips to one of these getaways.
Definitely.
Yeah, so that's awesome. Well, let's see. Okay, let's think through some other things here from just an overall travel perspective and sort of some of the changes maybe that you've seen. Some of the changes in consumer mindset maybe over the last year. I know you said you guys are all fully booked out. Do you expect that to continue to grow? Have you noticed anything interesting to share with us on how things are changing?
Yeah, I'd say one of the biggest things was we never really talked about safety before. Sometimes we would hear concerns from guests of, oh, is it safe? Does it lock? Is there a phone? Especially from some of our solo female travelers, we'd hear that. But it changed where, in every single message we were putting out, there was a value prop around safety and a different type of safety than how's the door locked and can I reach out to someone if I need help? So that was really interesting and something that we're still doing. We still have nano bars on our website that talk about cleanliness and safety. We're really fortunate that we didn't really have to change our operations. You always checked yourself into your cabin. There's no communal spaces, like I said. You always have your own space. It's outside. You don't come into contact with any of our staff. It's really, a place where you don't have to have small talk. You can just go. But we've also, we've really seen a strong desire from people to travel and get away. So once we kind of nailed that safety front, people were just itching to get out of their houses and off Zoom and get outside. And we think, like I said, we were really popular before COVID, but after this, I think we opened up to a different guest and a different customer. People that maybe rediscovered road trips they hadn't been on one since they were a kid, or rediscovered nature, or those mini vacations like you were talking about. Like, wow, the benefits of spending 2 days disconnected is just as amazing as a full week-long vacation. So
you all were definitely ahead of the curve, I guess you could say, from the standpoint I've been reading a little bit about smaller group travel versus large group travel, right? Getting outdoors, sort of this social distancing. I mean, all of this is pretty much built into what you had kind of going into this, which I think not only the just emotional, spiritual wellness, but everything else that we've been dealing with as a society recently. So that's huge.
Yeah, we were really lucky in a really challenging time for a lot of people. So
do you see a sort of a concern with some of the, I don't want to spend too much time. We definitely can't talk about kind of some of this pandemic specifics, but like I said, do you see something in your consumers impacting that? Or like I said, it seems like you're a little bit of a step away from that. So it's sort of an escape from that. What are you seeing from some of your customers?
We're seeing a bit of a broadening of our customer, but also still our core guest knows that, okay, if I want to go to Getaway, I need to book in advance. So we're still seeing those core guests coming as well. We've expanded into 6 new markets during the pandemic. So that's been really interesting, or maybe even 7, wow. Just going into completely new states and new parts of the country. And we just opened outside of Chicago in Michigan, and that was our biggest opening to date. We just opened in Nashville 2 weeks ago. So really just continuing to open up Getaway to more people and continuing to see that high demand and interest, which has been great.
What are some, can you let us know some more states or maybe cities that are coming just so people can kind of anticipate and plan for that?
Yes, I'm trying to think of what I'm allowed to say.
Okay, putting you on the spot, sorry.
I know that Seattle is one that we are already talking about. And I think that might be all I'm allowed to say, but stay tuned because we
Okay.
have about 5 more announcements coming up.
Awesome, for sure. What about like from a marketing standpoint? Obviously, the travel aspect is awesome. Super excited about that. But from a marketing standpoint, maybe you can tell us about some of, definitely touch over the last year, maybe some things that changed and how you reach the consumer. Obviously, we're coming out of that. And just what you anticipate going forward. What of those tactics and strategies will stay the same and what will maybe change?
Yeah, so we're a little unique in the travel space. I like to say we're almost like a D2C hospitality company. And part of that's probably due to my background in D2Cs, but also that's, the way John set it up. All of our guests book directly with us. We've never worked with a third-party OTA and we don't plan on it. It really is so important to us that, Getaway is such a meaningful, deep experience that we really want to have a direct relationship with our guests, and we want to know what they're looking for. We want to know why they're coming. During our booking flow, there's prompts about why they're coming, and we really make sure to tailor the experience and the content towards them. So we really take that mindset through all of our marketing. We have about 12 different channels that we market on. Say like your classic D2C channels that are all about driving both awareness but also bookings. So we have paid social is a really big one for us, and email. We have a huge email program, affiliate and influencer, referral. We have a blog, organic social. So really within each of those channels, we have a different channel manager. So that, as I said up at the top, the team is organized into brand, growth, and graphic design. And they all worked very closely together, but kind of the more organic channels sit under the brand umbrella, where more of the booking channels sit under the growth umbrella.
Got it. What about, is there anything maybe that you have tried that has not worked?
We famously did a programmatic direct mail campaign. So kind of your classic mailer that you get from your Caspers and your Allbirds of the worlds. And it had about $2,000.
In the physical mail?
Yes, physical mail, like those trifolds. And the way the programmatic mail works now is you can target similar to how you target someone on Facebook. So they'll use the same pixels to know where you've gone, and then you'll send a direct mailer. And it had about a $2,000 CPA. So that was a pretty big fail for us. But we shifted, and now we do direct mail strategy that's more of a rebooking or a win-back strategy, where within 30 days of checking out, you'll receive a handwritten postcard, like a robot hand, but handwritten postcard with a promo code encouraging you to come back. And we see much higher successes there.
I get that, especially with that positive experience and people coming back and feeling refreshed. Yeah. That is really interesting about the kind of direct mail pieces. I'm sure there's certain industries that works for. Like I hadn't even really thought about that channel recently, but obviously didn't work for you all this time. But yeah, I mean, you experimented, right? You have to try those.
Yeah, we're always trying new things, and part of our paid budget every month goes to experimentation. Because I think diversifying your channel mix is so important. So it's okay if we have some falls and some fails, and we are always trying new things. So
yeah, for sure. No, that makes sense. Definitely experimentation. And as things change and kind of markets change and people's behaviors, some things that didn't work sometimes may work or return better results. So that's important for sure. I'm interested in, because of the space I'm in, a little bit kind of influencer marketing. Obviously, we all know that's a big thing that's growing. Maybe you can share with us a little bit about how you approach that. Yeah. Do you use big influencers, small influencers? How even kind of the communication and kind of creative approval, and just any thoughts on that going forward? That's something I'd love to touch on a little bit.
Absolutely. So we kind of have almost a influencer affiliate hybrid model. So we don't pay influencers. I don't think we ever have, but we give free trips in exchange. And part of what they're exchanging is we create contracts where they're agreeing to a set number of posts with a unique promo code. And for some of our larger influencers, it's more closer to a traditional affiliate model where they will get a rev share. We host a few hundred, about 300 or 400 influencers a year across our properties. We save about 1% of nights at every location per month for influencers. We also have an artist fellowship program. And that's very different than the influencer program. And that's more, we host artists of all kinds. So ceramicists, chefs, photographers, illustrators, a lot of cartoonists from the New York Times or the New Yorker. We always try to reach out to them, and they come and they create content for us. They don't post any codes to their audience, and we then feature and highlight their content across our blog and our social, in a way to, kind of share who the creators are within our community.
What's your Instagram handle, just so everybody can follow it?
It's Getaway House.
Getaway House. Okay, I definitely want to check that out for sure.
We also only use assets that come in through influencers, artists, or UGC. I think we've done, in my 3.5 years, like 2 campaigns where we've taken photos, and they've just never been as authentic as what we're getting from our audience. So we really rely heavily on using all of these different people that are coming, but also our guests themselves for asset generation.
There's definitely, we've noticed a shift more toward authenticity, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes there can be sort of a contrived authenticity that's a little bit overproduced, but it definitely seems like the general public is more accepting of true authenticity, and it doesn't have to be the perfect asset or image, right? They want to know that it's real. Is that something that you're kind of seeing as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's such a, because the experience is so important to so many people, if we did something that wasn't authentic, I think we would just see like backlash. So it's really important to us to know what our guest wants and pay attention to that, and be sure we're doing that, whether that's in our messaging, the types of campaigns we're creating, and then also the images that we're showing.
What about, you mentioned influencers, real quick follow-up question on that, sort of affiliate program, or they have these codes, or you trade nights. What about from like an engagement standpoint? So obviously probably your key metric is booking, but do you care about the engagement that those posts get? Do you factor that into it? So is it all just nights booking, or how are you evaluating that? Because that's kind of can always be the challenge for a marketer.
Definitely. I mean, we pay attention up front and use lots of different tools and plugins to figure out, okay, are these real followers or are these bot followers? What's their engagement? So we pay a lot of attention to that up front. On every single post that we post ourselves on social, we talk about engagement. We also talk about saves. This has been a big metric for us recently. Saves, yeah. And just seeing these huge spikes where we had a post we put up on every Wednesday. We do Wellness Wednesdays where we share different tips. And I think this week's had about 750 likes, but 450 saves.
Wow.
Which is so interesting, that like deep level of engagement that we're seeing of someone saying, this is a value to me and I want to come back to this later. So we really pay attention to and talk across all metrics of engagement.
I have personally started using saves specifically for travel. So I'd be curious. If that's common, or all the different ways people use saves, but that's another conversation, but that makes sense. Everyone, just want to say, please submit some questions. We'll probably start doing some Q&A here in the next like 5 to 10 minutes. So please submit questions, travel related, getaway related, marketing related for Rachel. Rachel, what are some do you have any recommendations for travelers in general? And this might be how to get the best out of your getaway experience, or even beyond that, maybe like location agnostic, just tips that you've gleaned.
Yeah, I think as I think about travel, and as I talk about it so much with my friends right now, it's what's travel look like as we're coming out of COVID, and a lot of us are post-vaccination. And I think the conversations I've been having that are so interesting are just, doing what's right for you. For some people they might be comfortable to fly, and for others they might still be thinking about road trips as a way to ease back into travel, and more these few nights away to break up periods of intensity and not, 2 weeks to Europe. But also one thing that I found, I think I said, is I've planned my trips all the way through to November. So it's really tempting to do that. And I'm super guilty of it, but I'm also trying to keep in mind that some of my favorite trips aren't the ones that I've, created intense spreadsheets and maps and all the things I want to do and itineraries. Some of my favorite moments are just exploring and not over planning. So while it's tempting, I really recommend people keep that in mind.
I think that's a good reminder. I mean, there's such a tendency to pursue experiences, and like the common mindset of an experience is this location, this destination, checking this off the list, getting this photo. And again, this is kind of the full circle with Getaway, but it's a very strong experience, but like that non-traditional experience of creating that time and that space. And that's something that I think that maybe more people coming out of the pandemic would, there's been some downtime in different types of travel, but really understanding the value of space as we're all kind of enclosed over the last 12 months.
Totally.
A couple things here. Revenge travel. Revenge travel, is that a term? Are you familiar with that term? It's something I've started popping up. All right, well, I was curious your opinion on it. I guess it's this idea that there's a lot of pent up demand, and it's like people are just going to go crazy once they can get out. So I was just curious if you had an opinion on that, but we can.
I thought it was more of like revenge dating or something. Like you have a breakup and you want to go on a travel and show all your photos on Instagram.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of the revenge side gets a little crazy, but it's a term that's, I guess, been popping up a little bit. And then I've been reading about a little bit people sort of wanting to kind of return to familiar places. So there's a couple things I've been reading, sort of like this kind of luxury travel, like, hey, if you're going to go international and you're going to have to make the effort, vaccine, to go through this, let's do a little bit more, let's stay a little longer. And then there's kind of this idea of maybe returning to like a Disney World or a Disneyland, or these places that are familiar. Are you seeing any kind of data come in on sort of how people are perceiving different types of experiences or different types of vacations coming out of this? Or
We're not seeing any slowdown. I mean, we are still year over year, we're continuing to see that we're up month over month. So I think that while people, and I said myself, are still planning these bigger trips, I think we're also all still super connected. We're still on Zooms all day long. I think this is my 4th hour of the day on Zoom. So I think we still also are trying to find these little weekend escapes. I know I'm taking one next weekend and then one the following weekend after that. So still keeping in mind these like short periods to step away from our homes and our home offices and our computers and everything that we're tethered to.
Yeah, I was kind of reviewing some of these things about, some of the key things you all do: nature, free time, sort of, you have lock boxes for your phones, correct, at the locations?
Yeah.
Is that,
yep.
Just when I came back from my trip, didn't really have any music, anything. Like I put music onto my place. I was like, that's a little loud. There is something about, I don't think we can emphasize this enough, but the nature aspect and the natural sounds of that, and sort of technology, not just connectedness, but just like everything that brings into our headspace. So that's a huge, again, differentiator, I think, over Getaway, over some other forms of travel. Okay. I think we're going to shift gears here, Rachel, for a second. We're going to look at a couple of Q&As here. So these are going to be off the cuff. So feel free to pass. We'll see how these go. Okay. We've got a question here. What percent is programmatic media investment, and how is it used? I think that's as opposed to maybe, I'm guessing maybe over social. So like sort of maybe programmatic display. I don't want to slice and dice this.
0%. We don't do programmatic. We've done it a little in the past here and there. And it's just never had the same ROI that we're able to achieve on paid social, So right now we're not using it. We're rolling out a small test on podcast right now. So I guess that would, maybe some would say that would fall under programmatic, but the majority of it really is paid social.
What about connected TV, anything like sort of video streaming, tapped into that yet?
No, we have not. I think we're since we're still only outside of 15 cities, and we're still, I think this is the year where we will start to talk about this year and next year, like what does a DRTV campaign look like?
Okay, cool. Well, we look forward to that. Maybe you'll have to come back and share with us the results of that. That is actually something that would be awesome. I'm sure a lot of people come back to Brand Innovators, but sort of follow-ups after the fact, that'd be really awesome. Okay, how has the pandemic affected your partnership with other brands? Do you partner with other brands at all? Or?
We do. It's been so interesting. We've gotten so much inbound interest from brands that have physical spaces or bring their communities together. And that want to use our socially distanced outposts as a way to do that. So last summer, we partnered with Soho House at 5 of our properties, and they held socially distanced weekends for their members, where they were able to come and go on hikes and kind of do things, but spaced out. Everyone ate their own meals with their own cabins. So kind of a way to still engage with the Soho House community, but not be in close physical proximity. And I'd say that was kind of the beginning of the kickoff of a lot of brands reaching out to us, wanting to find ways to partner and activate at our outposts. So we have a lot more exciting things coming down the pipeline.
All right, thank you for that. A quick influencer question that I think came in earlier, I missed real quickly, is you talked about authenticity, so this might overlap with that, but how do you identify who's the right fit?
So we have all of our channels pretty much have a channel manager. So the woman that runs our influencer and affiliate program is really in charge of this and just making sure that they're authentic to Getaway. They're talking about things that we care about. They have the similar values to us. Nature is for everyone is an important one. We want to make sure they're inclusive. We want to make sure that they're showing different points of view. So.
There's a couple on here. I'm sorry, I'm playing catch up. How important is influencer marketing within kind of all of your strategy? Is it like kind of a pillar there? Is it something you're continuing to grow? Where does that stack up in the ranking?
It's something we're continuing to grow. So it doesn't compare to a paid social and an email and even the blog, but it's certainly continuing to grow, and it has almost like a waterfall effect. It has the assets that I was talking about. So it also gives us access to a lot of great assets. And we're continuing to invest in it and grow it every single quarter.
What about, so this is kind of always a question from like a creative standpoint, is how important is the data behind the influencer marketing? And does the metrics drive the messaging? Like, are you kind of always testing the messaging and like evaluating that and trying to shape that more? Or do you let it be a little bit more organic?
When it comes to influencer, we let it be really organic because, like I said, everything is about authenticity for us. So we want the influencer to be talking, like we don't tell them what to post. We say, might give ideas of these are things we'd like you to talk about, or these are things we don't. But at the end of the day, like we want them to post what feels right for them and their audience. However, on paid social and organic social, we kind of use those as testing grounds for messaging. So we're able to kind of really quickly see what are people engaging with, what are they excited by, what are they responding to, and then can roll that out across all of our other channels.
That's cool. That makes a ton of sense from a sort of test. There's a huge opportunity to do some quick testing and just evaluating. Oh, yeah. So that's important. Question, in general, college students are coming back in full force, travel is opening up. Where do you all stand with college students as a marketing channel?
So we have a bunch of different discounts for different interest groups. The first one we ever launched was college students back when we only had 3 locations. And that was Boston, New York, and DC. And our Boston property just saw so many different college students. So we have that 15% off discount for college students. We've done all sorts of different things marketing to them, from advertising in student newspapers. We have different language and different ad sets that we serve to college students. We've worked with college influencers. So definitely continue to do that.
Okay, awesome, very helpful. Kind of a marketing, I guess, a term that people sometimes use is surprise and delight for a consumer's experience. How do you guys think about that? What do you do to kind of seek to enhance that? And anything you can talk about in that arena would be great.
That's so important to us. So as I was saying, in our booking flow, we have prompts about why you're escaping. So when you come to your cabin and you check in, it might say, Joe, welcome to Getaway. We're so happy to have you here. We heard that you had just talked about how you spent 2 weeks writing a book. We hope you can unplug. So like really tying back to what those are. If it's someone's birthday, we'll give them a little treat. If it's, we see so many engagements, we'll, try to support through that. We also offer give all of our guests s'mores kits, which are free, but kind of in that note card it says like the s'mores are on us. And then for our pets, we also have pet s'mores kits that are dog-friendly s'mores. So that is another way we really we hear lots of feedback from dog parents about how delightful they found this to be.
So that is something that I've seen a lot of people who have new pets and like to travel with their pets, and obviously drivability is huge, and so you all cater to that. That's awesome. One quick thing on that, kind of surprising to like, so you actually have things when they show up. You've got like a card, or there's actual physical things. Okay, awesome. That's super cool. What about last thing in relation to this? I think we are winding down, but you mentioned sort of follow-up. So that's sort of you kind of do this quote unquote onboarding and sort of a questionnaire, and sort of sounds like really trying to help prep people for this time, because I think that, like, you know, if you can go into it with that mindset and whatever you all can do to help along the way, and then maybe there's kind of like a post trip, you mentioned a little bit. The original question was kind of the post trip, but maybe you can talk about sort of that prep again. You mentioned that questionnaire, but just even more abstractly, if it's not specific, but you know, does that make sense from like how to help people get the most out of those few days there?
Absolutely. We're like obsessed with our pre and post stay flow, and are actually working on it all quarter. So I've been in lots of meetings about that, both pre-stay, preparing the guest what to pack, answering those questions, but also telling them, don't plan too much. Here's a hike you can do, but you know, resist the temptation. And then post-stay, it's all about what did they enjoy? What do they want to change? So much from, you know, the linens to the way we build our cabins, everything has been impacted by this amazing feedback we get from our guests. So we really listen to all of it and take it to heart.
What is, before we jump, what is one piece of customer feedback that you all have maybe were surprised by, or just implemented? Like you said, there's a number of things. Give us just one example.
We had these, like, you know, those old timey camp mugs, those tin ones. We thought they were so cute. They were so on brand. And then we were hearing people say they were burning their fingers and burning their lips. And we had just spent all this money buying them for all 3 outposts, and pretty quickly pulled them out and put in more of like an insulated camp mug. So that was kind of the first one that came to mind.
Awesome. You don't always get it right, but you know, customers always give that feedback. Yep. So that's awesome. Well, I think that's all we have here today. Ariel, before we pass it off to you, Rachel, any last messages for people, you know, from a marketing perspective, from a travel perspective? I mean, this time has been amazing. Thank you so much. You've got a wealth of knowledge. So the floor is for you before we close out.
I'd say just get to know your guest, collect as much information as you can, and really listen to them and show them empathy and care. That's all people want, right?
Love it. Love it. That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Love that. Thank you so much. What a great way to end this session. Thank you, Joe. And thank you again, Rachel, for sharing your knowledge and insight with all of us. It was so appreciated.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye.
All right. Well, with that, I will welcome our next 2 speakers to the stage. Please give a warm welcome to Christine Ketmer, the Senior Director of Global Enterprise Insight and Strategy at Marriott International. This session will be moderated by Ken Mooring, Director of QSR, Healthcare, and Travel and Hospitality at Newstar. Welcome back, Ken. And hello, Christine.
Hi.
Thanks, Ariel. Hello, Christine. Good afternoon. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. How are you?
Good. I had a longer preamble teed up, but I will dispense with that because Ariel did such a good job. But you've been, you know, at this incredible brand, Marriott International, for over 7 years, spanning 4 roles, typically in brand focused or insights and strategy. So I think it's a very valuable opportunity for myself and the audience to hear from you and get your perspective. So thanks for doing this.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
So you started, you know, when you got out of undergrad, you started at a PR firm. You know, sorry, I like to go into people's background, a little Mark Maron piece here, but you started at a PR firm, then you went to Duke for your MBA, then took a kind of traditional route to be a brand person at J&J, but mostly on consumer-facing sides before Marriott International. How did your previous role and your MBA, for that matter, prepare you for your track record in insights and strategy at Marriott?
So I think I've been very fortunate throughout my career to have different experiences and opportunities. And I think what's kind of been a common theme and thread throughout different experiences has been just that focus on consumer behavior. I started off initially, as you said, like at a PR firm doing communications, focusing on behavior changes. And I used to tell people I can teach people to brush their teeth, but I don't know how to sell the toothpaste. And that's kind of what led me to go back to business school. I really wanted to work on the product side and really understand what is it that motivates people to buy certain brands, to be loyal to them. And then that's what kind of led me to the insights world and eventually at Marriott, where I'm now kind of understanding what it is that drives that behavior and what is that loyalty. And so again, I've kind of gone through the how, the what, and now the why. And I think that's been something that I've just really enjoyed throughout the past 15 plus years of my career, having all those different experiences.
Gotcha. And I feel like you were ahead of the curve and kind of seeing, you know, that world evolving. So good job on that. And we'll obviously continue with Marriott International, but wanted to ask you, you know, you recently become a founding member of the Women Leading Travel and Hospitality group. Can you tell us more about this group? What is its mission? What are you doing to help realize that goal?
Sure. So this is a wonderful organization. As you said, it's called Women Leading Travel and Hospitality. And we actually just launched this past January, in January of 2021. It was a group that I became involved with a couple months before that, last fall. And essentially, its purpose is to unite women across different hospitality and travel sectors. So thinking about the gamut of different opportunities that there are, especially as it relates to different hotel companies. So obviously, I help represent Marriott International, but there are competitors. So we have people from Intercontinental Hotel Group, from Hilton Worldwide, from all different sectors, as well as just like other areas within the industry. So you think about airlines, there's a woman who works in innovation at DFW. There are people from the online travel agencies. And the idea is that we're really just trying to empower and encourage each other and network and think about some of the things that we can do as an industry and share best practices. But really, it's all about just forming those connections and relationships and trying to connect with other people across the sectors.
Gotcha. Just off the cuff, do startups feature into that? Are you working with startups to help them bridge the gap between that initial idea and realizing scale and success?
I think there are a few different startups that are members. Yes. I mean, certainly some different partners and vendors and agencies are also involved, as well as just thinking through, again, what are sort of the short-term trends that we're seeing? What are the long-term implications? Like really a lot of idea sharing. We're actually having a conference, a virtual event next Thursday, May 20th, which should be great too. And it's a pretty low cost to entry. I think it costs on an individual basis about $65 or so for an individual membership. So if people or corporations or organizations are interested in joining, they should definitely check out the website. Again, it's called Women Leading Travel and Hospitality.
I've signed up. I'll keep my video off.
Okay, sounds good.
Or make sure I shave, whatever. So that was a bit of a selfish question because my wife has a travel-focused startup. But here's another selfish question.
Okay.
My daughter is entering college, wants to study business, which, you know, I'd happily have her think about her interests more broadly, but that's fine. But, you know, when you think about women graduating college this year and are considering careers options in travel, what advice would you have for them?
I would personally say go for it. I mean, there are so many different opportunities you can have within one company or one organization, depending on the functions, the different areas that you're interested in. And don't be afraid to kind of just dive right in. I mean, I think about, I had a manager for a long time who he started off after college as like a banquet server and then rose up to be 2 levels from the CEO and was the chief sales and marketing officer. So there are a plethora of opportunities that you can take advantage of if you're interested in working in the front office, the back of the house. You could be out helping guests at the pool or the beach, depending on the location. But there are just so many different things that you can do in terms of various skill sets. And you just learn and network so much. It's just a wonderful industry. And I think it's led me to a lot of different locations around the world, both for professional travel, but also personal trips and everything. And so I love it. I would say jump right in, go for it.
Yeah, and my daughter loves to travel, that's for sure. Now, this may be an insane question, but what signs of leadership do you look for entry-level employees when you're hiring?
I think that somebody who's a good leader would jump in with a lot of enthusiasm, would be ready to kind of hit the ground running, who would observe and learn and kind of lead from example too, but also just would want to take charge and would want to kind of go right away. So being that kind of extroverted personality, very charismatic, but also just taking some time to step back and to look at the way others are handling situations. I think that's really demonstrative of somebody who's very intentional and very focused, but also really wants to make a difference and to demonstrate those qualities and capabilities as well.
Awesome. I'll play this back for her, because she's not going to listen to me.
Okay. Or feel free to have her reach out to me. I love helping her, trying to guide.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you. In my research for this discussion, I've concluded that you're an optimistic and curious person, as one might be when they get to your level. How have those traits helped you manage through the global pandemic, whether it be personally or professionally?
So I think you definitely have to stay optimistic, especially I think if there's anything the past 15 plus months have taught us is that there will be ups and downs and highs and lows. So I think just in terms of trying to stay positive and optimistic, for me, it's finding gratitude in a lot of the small things that I probably previously took for granted. I have started doing a little bit of those gratitude journals where at the end of the day, I write 3 things down that happened that I probably might not have necessarily recognized or acknowledged in the past. And they could be little things, they could be big things, but I love to go back and read them and see some of the things that I've noted, because again, sometimes it's very minute things, but then other times it's big deals. And so it's nice to just be able to recognize those moments. And I think that helps me stay positive and just doing things for other people. I really want to try to help and serve however I can. And so whether it's being a support for my family, for my friends, for my coworkers, just trying to be that person who can offer a helping hand or listening voice or whatever it is, I think that's what helps me stay positive and grounded too.
Gotcha. And that kind of aligns with my worldview that positivity is a choice that you can decide to make or not. And I think positivity is the better choice.
Exactly.
To make the most obvious comment, hopefully I'll make today. You recently said in an interview, it's okay to fail. Have you had any failures in your career that ended up helping you achieve more in the long run?
So again, maybe this is just the optimist in me, but I wouldn't necessarily classify or consider things as failures, but maybe just redirections. I love the quote that rejection is protection, right? That for some reason you might shift, you might do something a little bit differently because of circumstances. And so I think for me, if it's maybe again, not something that would have been anticipated or expected, and I could maybe pivot or look at it as an opportunity to redirect, that's how I try to consider it. So that's where I've been.
Gotcha. Associated with that, if you could go back in time and tell yourself one thing, what would it be?
I would tell myself, just be ready, be excited, and try to connect and form good relationships with different types of people. I think as women, particularly, we're told a lot of times to have those board of directors or board of advisors who will be mentors and resources for us. And I think it's so important to have different types of board of directors or board of advisors. So I love the people who are the cheerleaders, the ones who will always look out for you and who will encourage you and support you no matter what. But I think you also need the ones who are kind of like the coaches. I think of the image of somebody who's entering a wrestling ring and there's a coach behind them massaging the shoulders and saying, this is what you should do, or this is the move you should make next. And I think you need people who will push you, those who will say, you are ready for this opportunity, or I trust in you. And I think that you are ready to take on this new challenge and I want to support you, but I think you need to have that confidence in yourself too. So I would just tell myself, surround yourself with great networks and good mentors and advisors who will help and encourage you along the way too.
Yeah, I wish you had told me that.
I have to tell it to myself a lot of times too, so we can tell each other.
I certainly have not segmented people in my life to that degree. That's interesting. We'll get more into segmentation later. But let's dig into your role at Marriott International. So you're Senior Director, Global Enterprise Insight and Strategy. That screams smart person to me. But what is under your purview with that kind of title?
So I think I'm incredibly fortunate because I have probably one of the best jobs, not only at Marriott International, but also within, I think, the world. I mean, essentially, I look at different trends, think about what are some of the expectations of our guests. I think about what it is that we're seeing play out real time in the market, and take all of that and collectively come up with recommendations, think about opportunities for our business, think about ways that we can really lean into it. And so from a strategy standpoint, we have a leadership team where they're just kind of constantly coming to us, and it's a little bit of that top-down approach. And then we're also more bottoms up, where we're helping them think through and say, these are the white spaces, these are the opportunities, like we need to tap into this, we need to leverage this. And it's really just fascinating because, again, things are changing and evolving constantly. There are all sorts of conditions and experiences that we wouldn't have not anticipated a few months ago, and that are so different even from a year ago or 7 years ago. So I think it's really cool that in the real-time moment, I'm able to think about, again, what are some of those opportunities, or where do we go from here?
Gotcha. You're the second person I've talked to today in the travel industry who absolutely loves her job. And it's really gratifying to see that. Let's dig into a little bit into data and insights. What advice would you have for travel marketers to get the most out of the data that they have at their disposal for their marketing purposes?
So when I think of data, the common conception is that it's just metrics, it's measures, it's performance figures, right, and it's really quantitative. And I agree on one level that that's absolutely accurate and true. But I think we have to think about like qualitative metrics, and where we can lean into like ethnographic research, where we can look into data that's like in the moment. So, obviously, like we haven't been able to go into people's homes lately or anything like that, but we see people at our hotels. We see people, we can do those observations or intercepts or interviews where we can just talk to guests in the moment, or we can pay attention to what they're saying on social media, not only about us, but about our competitors as well. So my advice would be lean into some of the channels and the outlets that are available, and make sure that you're thinking through it very holistically. Like, what is that end-to-end experience? And again, what's important to us might be different for other competitors, for other interest groups, but can we take something away from it that would identify some of those opportunities or white spaces too?
Gotcha, that's interesting. So yeah, it seems we've gone to this, the pendulum is swung to completely quantitative and metric driven, and we forget about the qualitative sometimes.
Exactly.
So sometimes the focus group of one should have validity, I guess.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Now, what's the best way for marketers to use their data to understand the impact of their efforts? Is it, I come from a lot of direct response background, and it's always, well, that's going to be bookings. But what other ways can people leverage their data?
I think that if they're seeing additional social chatter, if there's kind of that unaided awareness. So, think about like your Thanksgiving table. You could go around and talk to people about like what hotel brands come to mind. And if they were to say any of the ones that the 30 brands that are under Marriott International, that would make me really happy because they would have that as kind of the top of mind brand and reference point. So just thinking through, again, if it's considered, if it's being used, if it's something that like people are talking about spontaneously, I think those are the things where we kind of demonstrate success, and that we can say, okay, that ties back to like people know us, they value us, they trust us, and they want to hopefully have great experiences with us too.
Gotcha. Yep. And obviously, or it's very trite to say that first party data is incredibly important. And it is, but how are you engaging in the best way with your Marriott Bonvoy members as we are hopefully coming out of this pandemic?
Yeah, so we're very fortunate because we do have a lot of access to the different sources of data. So we have a platform where anytime our guests are filling out the surveys after their stays, they're rating, they're ranking, they're adding in verbatims where we can analyze for different sentiments. We can track just how properties are performing. We are also looking at our communities. We have a lot of channels where we have the chance for members to tell us feedback on different ideas that we're concepting or testing. We're trying to stay proactive with our communication too, just align expectations. I mean, a lot of things have changed over the past year or so. And so the stakes are really high for that sort of post-pandemic or first trip during this time. And we want to make sure our guests kind of know what to expect, because there will be some nuances and differences that they haven't seen before. And so I think just staying really transparent and honest, but also responding real time, like when people don't have a positive experience and they share that on social media, being there to acknowledge it and to hopefully make up for it, or just say, like, we want to, recognize, like, we would do everything in our power to prevent the situation, or thank you for this feedback. Or we love hearing the great stories too, where they are really giving kudos to some of our frontline associates who are working extremely hard during this time and just thinking through all of that. So I think as much as we can be really authentic in those conversations and listening to our members, it's so incredibly important.
And it's so incredible when you have that positive experience, you're in a rush, you're flying from meeting to meeting, not literally flying, but as a New Yorker, I feel like if I'm not in a rush, then I must be on vacation.
Exactly.
So yeah, when someone helps you out and someone really hooks you up, it's amazing. So at New Star, we think we're really, really strong in understanding pathways to conversion and through like our MTA products. We also have products for helping people understand non-converting pathways. How much is that negative helping out the positive, or how do you think about enhancing the conversion path?
So I think we have to look at some of those gaps, like what's creating the barrier that people might not book, or that they might not choose to go to one of our hotels and they select as competitors instead. And just really get into that a little bit further. Like, was it something like either in the experience as they were researching? Was it something that another ad caught their attention and it was a lower price? Like, trying to dig into that. And I think as much as we can, we want to try to get into this idea and mindset of our guests of what's most important to them. And it's going to vary by different trip occasion. Like, somebody who would be traveling for business will have a very different perspective than somebody who's going on a 2-week-long vacation, versus even the type of vacation somebody might have if they're just going for like a short weekend, or versus like, kind of that bucket list vacation or trip. So just really understanding like what prevented them and could we have done it better? Are there things that, again, along that customer journey or experience that we could improve or optimize so that hopefully we do get that conversion in the future too?
Gotcha. And it seems like pre-pandemic the world was a lot more simple when it came to things like consumer segmentation. And you've written a lot about this, but it seems like it's a lot more complicated now. Not sure if it will be forever, but there's I think you've talked about revenge travel. I'm thinking about, segments called grandmas who've done well in the stock market who want to visit grandchildren as a segment. How has that changed in your world?
Yeah, so definitely. I've heard that the term silver sneakers a few times being used for that segment as well. But I think that it really just
That's a better name.
Yeah. It really just depends in terms of, again, what people's motivation or purpose is. So I think what we've seen is that there's a lot of blurring and intersections that are happening. Like, it's not just exclusively like sort of one category or one segment. And that sometimes there could be like longer weekend stays where people are going to a personal trip, but they're extending it and they're working remotely. At Marriott, we launched this Work Anywhere program back in the fall where we're encouraging our guests. This was really based off of like a lot of the things that we were seeing play out real time, where guests can go, they can either book what we have as like a day pass, a stay pass, or a play pass, where they just go for the day, they go for the overnight, and they can be working maybe from their hotel room or a converted business center or whatever it is, but then they're also combining it with some family time or just relaxation and downtime too. So that's a whole segment in terms of just the idea that people are blurring their trip purposes and that it's no longer just one type of trip, that there's that combination. Going back to your point about like the revenge travel, I mean, I think it's really interesting. And I caught a little bit of the session with Rachel and Joe right before where they were talking and alluding to that. And I think that what's really interesting about revenge travel is that people will probably spend a little bit more again on that first post-pandemic trip, because we do see the accumulation of miles and travel credits, and just that they haven't necessarily spent as much on travel related expenses over the past year. So they are excited to not only get back out there and travel, but also hopefully take advantage of some new opportunities, new experiences that they haven't done before. And they're willing to spend a little bit more in the process too.
Yeah, and I think this is more or less informed by your writing, so excuse me, but I think that could have more lasting effects as people now realize that travel is not something to be taken for granted anymore.
Exactly. I think that there's a lot more gratitude in general when it comes to travel. Like, I've seen the headlines where business travelers have said, I miss the flight delays. I miss not just like the perks and privileges of going to like an airport lounge or maybe staying at like one of our hotels and going to the executive lounges or something, but I really just miss the idea that I can be productive on the road, that I'm interacting and experiencing new people, places, things along the way. And I won't take it for granted. I'm going to be more appreciative going forward. And even I've seen, it's funny because people like, as they're going back on planes, like I think people are being a little bit nicer to each other too, a little bit more accommodating, and just in general, trying to be appreciative that this is something that was such a part of their lives for so long. And then when it was kind of taken away, they didn't realize how much they missed it until it was gone too.
Oh, I love that trend. And I hope we're all nicer to each other in every facet of life. And I realize I'm from New York, but I believe that. Now, obviously there's been a huge impact on the travelers and the travel experience, but there's been also a massive impact on franchises or franchisees, people who own Marriotts. And I guess that's probably something like 2/3 of your, I don't know, what did I say before, 1.4 million properties. How are you guys helping, franchises with the economic impact of the pandemic?
So we've had a lot of listening sessions and different dialogues with our owners, with our franchisees, with our partners about what's most important to them in terms of their concerns. Since Marriott International started, the very first mantra of the company has always been, you take care of your associates first, they'll take care of the guests, and the guests will come back. And our owners and franchisees are obviously such huge partners in that. And so listening to what's important to them. I mean, many of them are small business owners, and they've said like, we need to be thinking about not just like some of our, capital expenditures and whatnot, but how are we going to pay our teams, our labor, our staff? Like, we need to make sure that we're thinking through their concerns. So lots of listening sessions. I'm on a couple of special task forces and projects where I'm really trying to represent the consumer point of view as we're thinking through, okay, what are some of the areas where it might not make as much of a difference to the guests? Like, could we take away, I think about like some of the in-room paper collateral. So we've always had little table tents or signs talking about, the elements that are in the room, just like water bottles, explaining like those kinds of things. Could we replace it with QR codes? Could we have something that would just be a little bit less, cost stringent and everything there too? So just understanding some of those like priorities and preferences, and really just keeping our pulse close to what they're saying and how we can help them in that way. It's been really important to us.
Yeah, and it's terrible that at 50 years old, I finally realized how critical hotel workers are. I mean, I always realized it when it was, we talked a little bit before, when you have a great experience, you remember it. But I had not put myself in those people's shoes before, and I have now, and I feel better about that. But yeah. And then, riffing on the question of before, is there something you would tell yourself now about the travel and hospitality industries that 7 years ago you didn't know, and it would have been good to know when you started your Marriott International career?
I think this probably goes back to something we were talking about with your daughter and the question related to what I would look for in terms of college graduates. It's just get as much experience as you can across different teams, and don't be afraid to try different opportunities. So say yes to challenges, or when you're tapped on the shoulder to participate in projects or groups, look at it as an opportunity. I mean, a couple of years ago, I had an incredible fortune to go when we were having some different challenges from the labor standpoint. I had the chance to go behind the scenes and work on property for almost 2 weeks. And it was just such a learning experience to see it through the eyes of kind of the back of the house and to interact with guests and to just be able to have that perspective and lens. It was something that I'll always remember because I had that opportunity and I said yes. So I would just go and say, there will be highs and lows, and again, those peaks and valleys, but take advantage of those opportunities and say yes, and don't be afraid to raise your hand too.
The reverse, would yourself 7 years ago be surprised at where you've gotten, or was this kind of the goal?
I think I'd be pretty surprised on some things. I mean, I've been so fortunate, like you said, I've had a couple different roles, and I think a common thread throughout them has been that consumer behavior side or the insight side, but I've gone from more of a regional role to a global role. I've done brand management, I've done insights, I've done strategy. So I think the experience of, again, working in different teams and networking, I mean, hospitality, I think in general, is such a connection-based business. And it's so important not only to form those relationships with the guests and with the teams, but also with your superiors, with the other people who you're working with. And I just think that, I would be a little bit surprised, but I just look back and maybe this is, again, the gratitude speaking, but I feel very fortunate that it's been leading me to the path where I'm on right now too.
Well, kudos. That's great. Getting back into kind of the future of travel, and here's the obvious, but I think important question. When we see the rebound of the travel industry, we have some people indicating it's not going to happen for a while, some saying it's going to happen very quickly. I think right now we're still far from normal, but what does returning normal mean to you, and will we ever be truly back to normal, or have we gone through a seismic shift where that has changed everything?
So I think there are a couple layers to that. I mean, I think that we probably won't ever go back to the way it was, but we're moving towards that next normal. So what it's going to be in the future. And I think some things have definitely shifted towards the better, and that we've really leaned into preferences and nuances and considerations that are super top of mind and that will always be relevant. I think some things, there are just things that we will want to have continue that we've focused in on. So I think about sanitation and cleanliness. Like there was I think an announcement from the CDC a few weeks ago that a lot of the different protocols that were in place were more of that like hygiene theater. And I don't know that that's not still important. I think that that's something that's really now expected and assumed. And again, going back to this idea that like some people haven't gone out there and traveled for a long time, like they expect to see that. And we want to make sure that we're having those different cues, those visual indicators where we're showing like we do take this seriously. And of course we have like very stringent protocols and standards and everything, but having the visible touch points where people are saying like, okay, we can see demonstrable cues of people doing cleanliness procedures and whatnot. I think that's really important. So going back to the question, like, I think this is kind of the evolved normal or that next normal, and people, it's going to still be really important. And we just kind of have to take it a day at a time and make sure that we're listening, we're paying attention, and that we're adapting and adjusting as we can if we need to.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And I must admit that I've never used Purell with any kind of in any habitual way before. I was always a you got to eat a lot of dirt to die person, but I've changed my tune, even though we know that it's not really on surfaces, etc.
Exactly.
Apart from the cleanliness aspect, are there other aspects of the travel experience that will have changed for the good going forward?
I think people, going back to this idea that people will appreciate it a little bit more, that they'll also focus and lean into this idea of purposeful travel. So people are going to destinations feeling like, I want to leave feeling better than when I arrived. I want to feel some sort of intentionality or purpose when I'm traveling. Not just that I'm going to check the box or do what I need to do, but that you feel good about it. And so I think a lot of it has to do with that newfound appreciation. I think also people will be more focused on nature. I loved what Rachel was talking about in terms of the experiences of being outdoors and incorporating different natural elements. Like we've seen people talk about, like they have these open air skies and celestial experiences where they're seeing stars for the first time in these previously polluted environments and stuff. And I think it's so much of a kind of returning to that like organic roots, and people want to experience it. So I think that's something that we'll see is changing and evolving, definitely, that probably hopefully will continue even as people take different types of trips, that they'll just have that newfound appreciation too.
Gotcha. That's interesting. And your CEO, Tony Capuano, recently said the distinction between business and leisure travel is fading. And you've talked already today about mixing purposes for a trip. Does this all mean that I'll be able to see stars when I stay at a Marriott when I go to the meeting in Chicago? Or really the question is, what does this mean, for Marriott and for the industry, as you guys think about, marketing, as you guys think about insights, etc.?
Yeah, so Tony recently talked about that idea that, like, as we said, like the different trip purposes are merging. So people are taking more of the leisure trips, the extended vacations, that kind of thing. And what I think that really means is that, again, there's a blurring that's occurring. It's no longer like one type of trip, it's the two combined, or there are multiple layers within it. And I think what's interesting is that in terms of the experiences for people going forward, it's going to be different types of business trips. Like I consider, for example, when you think about how several teams are starting to work more remotely, or organizations or companies are thinking about the flexibility of having people work from home, there's still going to be a need for people to connect in person. They miss that social interaction. They want to be together with their friends, their coworkers, etc. And so we are anticipating that some people who previously never really traveled for work, they're going to start to be the travelers that will travel a little bit more frequently. Maybe there will be a quarterly get together, or they'll have some all hands meeting where everybody needs to be in the same place. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see like how people shift their business travel in addition to maximizing it. Like if they previously went in for 1 or 2 sales meetings or closings, maybe they'll go to a certain location for like 4 or 5 meetings and just maximize that ROI as they're thinking through, because otherwise they could potentially do it virtually, but there is something so important and tangible about that face-to-face in-person connection too.
Yes, it'd be good to leverage being out of the house for longer periods. And I'm sure everyone in my family agrees that it would be good to have me out of the house for longer periods. But, when it comes to guest preferences, there's going to be a host of new variables. Do you see any trends there, or any big changes?
I think some of the biggest changes have been around connecting their devices, like being able to have that consistent, reliable Wi-Fi, knowing that they can work from anywhere. I think also just we were doing a lot in terms of the contactless and touchless technology before the pandemic started. So the remote keys, the keyless entries where they can skip the desk, where you can have it downloaded to their app at a time. There's a lot of that I think is leading into opportunities where people already were headed, but it's just been accelerated. I think that we've seen such a digital transformation over these past, again, 15 plus months that has really accelerated a lot of those needs and behaviors as well.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I no longer want to have to figure out where ESPN is on the local TV system, and just using my iPad would be just, chef's kiss. What was the first time during the pandemic that you started to see promising data that suggested travel might be turning the corner? What data really, in your mind, was that tipping point? Or is it still to come?
I think there have been some we talk a lot about like the green shoots, like those promising indicators where we've seen either by market, like certain destinations that are popping to the top in terms of search or bookings. Definitely like over peak periods where people typically travel. So vacation periods, holidays, long weekends, we are seeing a lot of those good signs where there's strong intention. Either people are booking or they are searching. And so I think, some of the signs of optimism, it happened pretty early on. People miss travel right away. I think that was one of the things that was so interesting is, again, going back to this idea that you don't even realize how much you miss it until it's gone. But I think that as we were seeing people explore virtual vacations or for broad inspiration, like thinking about that next big trip, that when we saw that we had different destinations that were really rising to the top where people were going for longer stays, they were making kind of last minute decisions to go somewhere for a long weekend or something. Those were those green shoots. Those were the signs of optimism and recovery. And certainly this summer, it's really, we're right now in this great timing of the perfect storm where we're so fortunate as a country that a lot of people are starting to get more fully vaccinated. The weather is getting better. Schools are wrapping up for the year. People have the pent up vacation. They have the extra miles or whatever it is. So in terms of all of these factors and variables coming together, we really are anticipating that there's going to be a lot of enthusiasm and excitement this summer. And our hotels are ready. We're ready to welcome you. And we can't wait to do so when the timing is right, whatever that means for people.
Gosh, I'm kind of low on miles. Maybe we can have another meeting about that. But 2020 was not just about COVID-19, right? There was a number of societal changes that we've gone through, and a lot of that's been reflected in the way that corporations are behaving and the way they look at social issues in the U.S. Do consumers and employees drive this broadly, or where is that coming from? Do you think it's a fad? How is Marriott dealing with that?
Yeah, you think about the past year plus, like there were so many, as you said, like different causes and movements that our guests, the people in the general population, everybody was kind of aligning themselves to. And these are important movements and causes that brands need to have a voice in that conversation. It can't just be an acknowledgement, but it needs to be participating actively in that dialogue. So I don't consider it a fad. I think it's something that we've seen that our guests are really going to align themselves and be loyal to brands where they have those meaningful connections and relationships, and that they're participating in the conversation in a very authentic way, that it's very sincere. It's not just because they should, but it's because they want to. And it might be good for business, but it also is the right thing in general to do as individuals and as companies and groups too.
Right, and that's very pleasing to hear, honestly, that perspective.
Thank you.
From my side. Ariel, is it time for us to move on?
You are actually the last speakers of the day, so I'll give you a few more minutes to close it out.
Awesome. Well, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, Christine, is I think you've, in your role, you've had a chance to go spend time in international markets, which is, I think, everyone's career aspiration at some point or another. It's certainly my daughter's. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What did you learn? What was surprising, et cetera?
Sure, happy to. So yes, as you said, I've been very fortunate. I've been able to go abroad a few different times for professional purposes. I had a couple stints where I've done task forces in different countries. And most recently, that includes going before the pandemic. So back in 2019, I went to Asia for about 4.5 months. So I was based out of our Marriott office in Hong Kong, and then traveled all around the region, got to go to, candidly, I lost count, I think about 25 or 30 different hotels. So I went to China, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Singapore. I went back later in the year to do about 8 of our hotels in India as well. And it was just such an incredible opportunity to learn and connect with the guests, with the associates, with the teams. And when I was there, I would just mostly do trainings and sessions where I would talk to them about our brand positioning. We would do workshops together where we would strategize and say, okay, this is something that we're seeing as a challenge, or this is something that we're doing really well that we want to share with others. So thinking through how we could replicate that or turn it into a best practice. And I loved it. It was just one of the most incredible experiences I could have ever asked for professionally, because not only did it feel really tangible and impactful that I was able to be there and to see like kind of real time how it played out, but also just, again, the chance to connect with incredible associates from around the world. And we are so fortunate. We have 700,000 associates, 7,600 hotels, 30 brands. And I mean, just to be a small micro segment of that was just a wonderfully humbling and amazing experience too.
Well, Art, thank you. That's illustrative or illuminative. And relatedly, one more question. I know this time has really flown by. You know, if I could visit any Marriott International hotel tomorrow, what would your recommendation be?
So do you have a preference for a country, or is it domestically that you're considering? I mean, again, so many.
Let's go internationally because, you know, as long as we're aspiring, let's go big.
Okay. So, of course, I'm going to promote a couple of the JW Marriotts because I was on the global brand team for 2.5 years, but we have incredible properties. I would say in Phu Quoc, Vietnam, it was rated as one of Travel and Leisure's top resorts in Asia for several years in a row. There's a great property in the Maldives too, or the Shanghai if you're looking for city center. I think also abroad, we have just amazing Ritz-Carltons, Ritz-Carlton Reserves. A lot of people don't even know that Ritz-Carlton is part of the Marriott International umbrella, but we have wonderful brands for W, Westin, I mean, Renaissance, the Marriott signature brands. There are properties I think about in Barcelona, in London, in Palma de Mallorca, Spain. I mean, it's just the whole gamut. Like that's why I think people are so excited and eager to travel, and that revenge travel is real, that people have been planning those bucket list trips for a long time now. And hopefully, again, won't take it for granted, but we'll really lean into it and want to go places around the world and come to our hotels.
Well, on that note, everyone should log into their Bonvoy account and see how many points you need and get on the road. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Ken. Great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you to both of you. That was such a fascinating conversation, and I cannot wait to see you both back on the stage soon.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Have a good day, everybody.
So with that, we will close the day. Thank you everyone for joining. It was a fantastic day of speakers. We hope that you will join us tomorrow, May 14th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Brand Innovators Sports Upfronts. We will be joined by marketing leaders from AB InBev, Danone, the National Women's Soccer League, Nationwide, Ally, Pen Pal, Wells Fargo, PepsiCo, Verizon, EA, and many, many more. So thank you again for joining everyone and hope to see you tomorrow.